All right, at 4:32, call the meeting of Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Dorothy, could you please take roll?
Yes, sir. Garrett Harmon,
Here.
Trisha Byram,
Here.
David Jones,
Here.
Rustin Zuber,
Here.
Cliff Tuttle,
Here.
David Lipscomb.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. First item on is the consent agenda. All items listed below on the consent agenda are considered routine or ministerial in nature and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case these items will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Item 1B is approval of the minutes from November 14th. Commissioners, do you have any comments? I did see one correction on page 7 of the packet. At the end of item 3A, I believe that approval of Comanche Trace Phase 7 was not what we were looking at. It would be approval of the Cuesta Estates.
Chairman, you're talking about 3B?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, 3B, I'm sorry, yes,
The
3B.
Enclave? Okay.
Yes, the Enclave. Commissioners, any other comments? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, raise your right hand. Passes 6-0. All right. Just real quick before we get any further, ladies and gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind, please silencing your phones. And we got a lot of folks in here today and want to try and move things along quickly. Appreciate it. Item 2A is a public hearing and resolution regarding zoning classification. Drew, please help us out on this.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Good afternoon. This is a public hearing, consideration and action to recommend an ordinance to change the zoning from R1 single family to R2 medium density residential, which includes a proposed amendment to the future land use plan of the city's comprehensive plan. On approximately 225.69 acres, proposed Vintage Heights Subdivision, generally located east of Medina Highway and south of Riverhill Boulevard. With that, I'll turn it over to the applicant to give their presentation.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Mr. Chairman, Commission members, my name is Chuck Kamak, and I am the owner of this property. And I wanted to give, just first say that I thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you and to present our proposal on this. And also want to thank you for all the job that you do. I know this is not all questions that come before you are tough or easy, and this one may be a little tough. And just from a personal standpoint, I want to thank you all for your service. We're here today to obtain preliminary approval of the plat for our residential subdivision. You can see on the board. And phase 1 has a total of 287 units. And the subdivision has a total of 510 proposed. We're also requesting a zoning change from a R1 to a R2. And the main reason that we are before you today is because of a need that has been presented in this community. The Kerrville 2050 plan was adopted in June of last year, and I was at that meeting, and it outlined the need for workforce housing in this community. The 2050 plan pointed out on page 123 that there was a lack of supply in Kerrville, particularly in homes in the $150,000 to $250,000 range. It also stated that the demand for housing products is the highest for people that earn $50,000 to $75,000 per year, which they can support a home purchase in the $200,000 to $250,000 range, and that the current market is having a difficult time delivering this product. The challenge of affordable housing in Kerrville is well known to the community. It was expressed in stakeholder interviews, and 89% of the respondents of the survey to this plan indicated that affordable housing was important or somewhat important. So the lack of inventory in the affordable housing category has begun to have an effect not only on the growth of the population in Kerrville, but that folks are just simply unable to find a place to live. This is on page 127 of the Kerrville 2050 plan. There was a Kerrville housing study and strategic plan that was completed earlier this year, 2019. And in that, it shows the major employers, and you all know who they are, the Peterson Hospital being the largest with 1,000 employees, James Avery, Kerrville ISD, State Hospital, VA Hospital, HEB, and so forth. And also in that housing report, on page 20, it stated that there 42% of the population of Kerrville is over the age of 55. And one last thing that study pointed out that I want to bring to your attention, that the median household income, and that was according to a 2010 study, was $46,000. I believe that number may be somewhat higher now. But bottom line, Kerrville is a retirement community. And what if the greatest need of folks in this age bracket, and I'm in that age bracket too, one of the greatest needs is health care. And where are the health care professionals going to live? Studies have shown that there is not sufficient housing available in a community in the price range that healthcare workers, teachers, firefighters, and folks in the medium income bracket can afford. The project that we're proposing, Vintage Heights, will have homes in the $200,000 price range. And that is a price range that people can afford. Now, as we've prepared for this meeting, we've come to hear that there's been some rumors and some misinformation about this project. So we're here to provide information and to answer any questions that anyone has. One of the major questions is traffic. How will this affect our adjoining neighborhood of Riverhill, and most importantly, Riverhill Boulevard? And we've had a traffic study completed, and we'll present the findings of that today. And it showed that there would be no major impact.
Okay, that's enough. Thank you.
And again, those are the facts. And again, there's misinformation out there. Another piece of information is that home values will decrease.
Oh, no.
And that is not correct, and we have data to support this as well. We've heard that there would be homes in the $120,000 range, and that is not true. The beginning home would be $180,000. We've heard that there will be narrow streets. They'll be 20-foot wide, and that's not correct either. The Plat shows the width of those. We understand that regarding the traffic, we're going to present that Green Tree Lane, Hickory Hills Lane, and Ridgewood Drive are all stubbed out into our property. And we tried to look for a plan where we would not have to connect to those streets. But there's simply, that plan does not exist. And I can let city officials talk about that. But for fire code and safety code and other access issues, it's simply not possible. We tried to put gates on them. And again, that's not allowed under city ordinance. So we have the traffic analysis, and that will be presented. What we need to understand concerning traffic is that the main access to our subdivision will be by means of a street called Vintage Heights Avenue. And that will be accessed off of Highway 16, Medina Highway. That will be a full access intersection with turn lanes and, if needed in the future, traffic lights. And one of the main things I want to point out concerning the issue of traffic is there is, and we'll show it on a future map, it's not on this one, I'm sorry, but there is a future proposed thoroughfare that would connect Highway 16 with Highway 173. And we've already dedicated right-of-way for this. I don't know the timing of this, that's up to city officials, and I think if folks are here and not in favor of what we're doing, I think you should also talk, the same folks should talk to city officials about that thoroughfare, because that could become a reality and that could relieve traffic very quickly. So we'll go into that issue in further detail and present the results of that study. Those are the highlights that I want to present. The other issue that I want to talk about is home values, and we should have a slide. I don't know where to go to find that, to bring that up, but in the community, you have a clicker? Right here, sorry. Of River Hills, we pulled from MLS data all sales of homes of $300,000 or less for the 24 months that ended on December 4th of this year. There were 36 sales in that category, and the average sales price was $238,000. The average square foot was 2,035, and the average sales price per square foot was $115. And what I'm here to tell you today, that's exactly the same kind of product that we are bringing to the market. The same size. We're bringing 180,000 to 225 price range, and the price of our homes when they sell will be in the $110 to $115 per square foot range. And again, there's a lot of rumors and a lot of misinformation floating around, but these are the facts and supported by research and by MLS data. We're simply just selling a product that already exists, but it's in short supply. We're also going to talk about our zoning change request, and we're requesting a change from the current classification of R1 to R2. And the main reason for this change is our lot width. All lots in the subdivision will have a minimum width of 45 feet and a minimum length of 120. So that's a total of 5,400 square feet. And the R1 designation has a minimum of 5,000. So we are above the minimum required for all lots in the subdivision of the R1 designation. And if we did not request this change to R2, if we stayed with R1 and did not provide any open space, which I'll talk about in a moment, we could build 700 homes on this property, according to the current zoning regulations. And we are choosing to leave 40% of our property as open space, 97 acres. It will be walking trails. It will be owned by the HOA. It will not be developed. And I don't know of any developer that's going to stand up in front of you and say, we're not going to develop 40% of our land. So that's something that we're choosing to do. And as a result, we're providing 500 homes instead of 700. And all of the homes will be single family, detached residences. There are no townhomes, there are no duplexes, there are no patio homes. We're submitting a plat, it was on the screen earlier, and it shows that. If we wanted to put those type of homes on this property, we would have to come back before the commission and request another zoning change. But this plat is set, we have no plans to do any of that in the future. Every home in the subdivision will be a single-family detached residence. This Vintage Heights subdivision meets the definition of a cluster-type development according to the city zoning code. It's page 74. And again, we're not building on the hillsides. We're trying to preserve the integrity and the beauty of the hill country that we all love. The other point that we will bring out in our presentation today is the quality of the homes and of the neighborhood. I'm the owner of the property. I'm going to develop it out into finished lots. All of those finished lots will be under contract to sell to D.R. Horton, who's the major, largest home builder in the country. They build more homes than anybody else. And they're going to make a presentation that's going to show you the quality of the homes. It's an amenitized neighborhood. It will have a homeowner association. It will have an architectural control committee. And it will have covenants and restrictions. So this will be a community that really Kerrville can be proud of. And it will be a legacy to anyone that would be involved. So the facts and the data show that that our project fulfills a need for workforce housing in your community. We have no townhomes, no patio homes, or no duplexes. They're all single-family detached garages. All lots have a minimum of 5,400 square feet, and 40% of our property will be open space. The traffic impact analysis study will show that there is no significant traffic impact, and the data suggests that there would be no decrease in existing home values. And I'm sure that there will be a lot of folks here that are going to have something to say about this project that won't be positive, won't be in favor of it, and I respect that. But I just want to close by saying there's a lot of people that didn't get letters because they're not located adjacent to this property that probably would be here, and they would say how they need a place to live. And these are the nurses, these are the firefighters, and these are the people that work in this community. So I don't know if any of those folks were here to stand up and say today, but I'll speak for them. This community needs that, and we have a plan to present that and make that available to the city of Kerrville. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Greg Richards, and Chuck has asked me to speak for a bit on the zoning portion of the request for a change. Last month, you guys heard a zoning request that was pretty controversial. And I think from what I saw watching that video, part of the controversy was in the unknown. That there was a request for a zoning from an R1 to an R2, and that was going to allow a multitude of uses. And in this case, this zoning change request is being submitted at the same time as a preliminary plat. And the point of doing that is so that the developer is absolutely transparent about what they intend to do with this property. That it's all going to be developed in single-family lots, no townhomes, no patio homes, no duplexes. As Chuck said, the property could be developed under the current R1 designation into over 700 lots. But because of a desire to preserve some of the beauty of the hill country and to have an attractive subdivision, the developer has chosen to set aside 40% of that property to leave it in its natural state, both for the quality of the community and the quality of the development. Kerrville is really fortunate to have a developer that has a national presence come into this market and be able to build this number of homes. And the debate has been raging for quite some time about how we get workforce housing in Kerrville. And we've had builders try to do that in 10 lots at a time, 20 lots at a time. part of it is the significant expense that goes with doing a development. And that I know of, and I've lived here for 25 years, there hasn't been a development of this size and this scope for this type of product within the Kerrville market. And it really bears a necessary look to give due consideration to Vintage Hills becoming a reality in Kerrville. The zoning change, while a zoning change from an R1 to an R2 would involve typically multiple possible uses, those are not being sought in this case. And in fact, if you look at the details of the plat, the description of the lots and the size of the lots, they're actually greater than the minimum required for an R1. The setbacks that we're requesting are only 5 foot less than what the setbacks would be in an R1. And the lot width is only 5 foot less than what would be required in an R1. But ultimately, with the bigger large lot size, because we're adding more depth to it. Let me pull up. Is it this one?
Yeah.
Okay, so this shows, this is a Google Earth map view looking generally south into the development. And if you look at it closely, you can see where the lots are and where the green spaces are, and because we've created an overlay. One thing I do want to point out is if you see the blue line up at the top, that is the proposed dedicated right-of-way that the developer has included in this preliminary plat to dedicate to the city for the city to use along with adjacent landowners to provide a new thoroughfare from 173 to 16, which will help alleviate cross traffic that goes through the Riverhill subdivision. We also took a look at how the zoning in this proposed project relates to the existing zoning in the area. And if you look on this particular drawing, what we've done is we've taken Riverhill and we've looked at what is zoned R1 and what is zoned R2. And then we've created a comparative map showing effectively what the development of Vintage Heights would look like. If you look in Riverhill, there are probably 7 different identifiable neighborhoods that are zoned R2. And those are townhomes, patio homes that are all built on narrower lot lines than what we're proposing. And the Riverhill subdivision with this configuration and this balance of R1 and R2 has existed harmoniously for decades. And the way that Vintage Heights is going to be developed into this cluster style development where you've got clusters of lots with lots of large open spaces is really harmonious and similar to what already exists within Riverhill, and we feel will be complementary to what exists in that development. If y'all have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. No, thank you.
So the red line on the right side, is that where Russell Pines Drive is?
The red line on the right side.
Of the development? Yes, that is it.
That's new.
That's House of Pines. It's right behind our houses. It's right behind our houses. Right behind our houses. And so you're saying that the road that is right behind our house.
Can we hold the rest of the questions for the public hearing? Can we hold the rest of the questions for the public hearing?
Oh, okay. You said I had questions.
I had one question.
Sorry.
Let's wait until we have the public hearing for those questions. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Excuse me, I don't do this a lot, so we'll just kind of keep it quick. But I did want to address the TIA, and it sounds like we're going to have some very good questions about that. But
Please state your name for the record.
my name's Renato Londo, and I'm the traffic engineer or the traffic consultant working on this project. And basically, I was asked to assess the traffic impacts associated with the development, with the single-family residential development. So I've got a few slides. I'm going to try to explain a little bit about what the TIA is. I know there's probably a lot of folks here who do not understand what a TIA is or don't know what we do. We don't take a guess at this. We use traffic engineering practices, and we look at, I guess, guidelines prepared by other agencies, and we assess traffic. So that's the best we can do. I think I shut that off. Let's see here. So again, my name's Renato Lunda with AC Group out of San Antonio. I'm a traffic engineer, and I was asked to assist with this project and basically to assess traffic. So our site, and I guess we've all become a little bit familiar with it. I've got a pointer here, but I don't know if it's going to work on the screens. It usually doesn't. So again, we have two access points on State Highway 16. The primary right about the center of the development, and one to the south, which is where we were talking about that future arterial or the future thoroughfare. Thank you. And then we're going to also have some cross access into the developments to the north of that. So there will. Okay, so Highway 16. Let me see here. So Highway 16 is on the north side. That's this highway right here, running here. And I'm sorry, the mouse is a little slow. So our primary access point will be this street access here, and we're going to have a second one to the south. And in addition to those two access points on State Highway 16, we're going to have some cross access onto the Riverhill collector. So I know that's going to be an issue. We'll address that as well. So that's the development we're looking at.
Okay,
So-
leave that up, please.
Okay.
Till you spend. Where is your access point off 16?
So there will be two, sir. There will be the primary just south of Riverhill, which is that point right there, and a secondary for phase 2 at the southern point of the development.
And the three off of Riverhill Boulevard will be where?
So those will be right around this location, 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that said, I guess with that said, we'll address that first before we move on, I guess. So our thought here is when we work on a traffic study, we have to do a couple of things. We have to generate traffic. We project our traffic based on the size of the development and the land use. So here's single-family residential, and the size, 507 units. So with that, and I'll move to the next slide. We have, and this is engineering practice. We've been using these they're basically a trip generation manuals that we use that are developed nationwide. They're used nationwide. What they do is they give us rates for the land use. So for 507 homes or dwelling units, we have these rates. So and I've highlighted in blue for the AM and in red for the PM. So PM being the highest rate of 0.99 trips for the number of units that we're developing. So 507 times 0.99 gave me 502 trips. So now I'm working with 502 trips that this site or this project is going to generate. Of those 502, we have 63% that will be entering in the PM peak or in the evening. And we have and 186 that will be exiting. So all this makes sense. In the morning, everyone leaves. If we look at the morning peak, we have 281 that are exiting. And in the evening, when everyone's done with work, they come back, and we have 316 trips returning. So it all makes sense. Everyone leaves the subdivision in the morning, and they come back in the evening. So the next step is after we generate our traffic. Well, you typically, even school traffic is pass-by traffic, or it's internal capture traffic. So it's basically not in the. Yes, ma'am. And those trips are, I guess, when they calculate these trips, it's all traffic. So if there's commercial trucks, it's everything. That's how they calculate those trips there. So yes, it does include it.
Excuse me, could we hold these questions until we have the open meeting? Let him finish his
I'll try to make this
presentation.
quick so we can get to the questions. So the second step is to distribute this traffic. Basically, where are we sending it? Where is this traffic from the subdivision going to go, and where's it going to come from? So our estimates are based on where these, I guess it's a single family residential, so they're basically homeowners traveling to and from work in the morning. So a large percentage is going to travel towards Kerrville, and that's exactly what we've anticipated here. About 90% of the trips to be generated and attracted by this subdivision will go towards Kerrville. Will travel north towards Kerrville. The routes they will take is State Highway 16, and we projected about 70% of the traffic to use that route, and the other will be Riverhill towards State Highway 173. That's about 20%. That's 70 and 20. 70% using the State Highway 16 to the north, and 20% using Riverhill to the, to the northeast towards State Highway 173. The remaining 10% will travel south. So we can't ignore that there will be traffic traveling south from this development. So that's basically the two major steps that we have to get to analyze these intersections. And again, we're not guessing at this. We use some software, and we've been doing this for over 20 years. It's a software application we use. It's called Synchro. And basically what it does is it takes our traffic control, number of lanes, basically the geometry of the intersection. When we analyze, what we do is we look at the existing traffic to see what the conditions are currently. What are we looking at now? We then project those to the built-out year, because when we come in with this development, it's not coming in now, it's coming in the future. So we're basically projecting to that future. What will that future look without the development and with the development? And that's why we have three scenarios, and that's where I get this table. So just a little bit about the results. So and let me see if I can kind of highlight that with the arrows here. So we have AM peak and we have PM peak. So we're analyzing 2 daily peaks. And during those daily peaks, we're analyzing the existing conditions, the no build, which is basically what would it look like in the future without our development, and what does it look like with our development, which we call our built out. So when we analyze these scenarios, we run these numbers through the models. We get measures of efficiency, basically, MOEs. So these measures of efficiency are basically calculating delay at that intersection. And that's why when we say minimal impacts, it's looking at actual delay. It's a microscopic model that looks at each of these vehicles and how much time they spend at this intersection. So if we look at most of those, we are currently operating at A. So now, this is not an exact science, but it gives you a good snapshot of what's happening out there and what we can expect to happen out there once this development is in place. So what we have found, and the reason we are summarizing saying that there is a minimal impact or not really a significant impact, is that we found that in all 3 scenarios for all of our intersections, and this is Riverhill and State Highway 16, Riverhill and that's the name of that street just to the east, Green Tree, and then our two driveway or street access points. Now, typically on your access points, you're going to see very little increase in delay overall because our State Highway 16 traffic is a free flow. There's no stop signs there. So the majority of our traffic on the state highway has 0 delay. When we do start to see some delays as we introduce these development and we introduce left turns into the development, we'll pick up some delay on the highway. But for the most part, it's a free flow condition. So the majority of our delay is exiting the development, and that's what we see. But that becomes an internal issue to the subdivision, not a city, county, or state issue. I mean, it's basically internal. So when we say we found minimal delay or impacts, it's because of these numbers that we have seen. Now, the other issue that I think we need to address, and because I heard some comments on that as well, is the possibility of additional pass-through traffic or additional loading of traffic on Riverhill between State Highway 16 and 173. Now, that is certainly a big concern. Now, we're pushing 20% of our traffic along Riverhill towards 173, but even that is minimal. It's 60 trips in the peak, 60 vehicles. Right now, we only have 34. There's nothing on that roadway. So we collect the traffic out there, we know what's out there. Now, Riverhill, something we need to consider as well is that Riverhill is a collector roadway that connects 2 major arterials, or basically a highway. So typically we expect to see upwards of 8,000 daily trips. We won't even have 1,000 daily trips after this is even in place. So this collector will serve to its job and basically collect from both subdivisions or all the subdivisions and move traffic towards the highways. So, yes, we are going to see that issue. There's just no avoiding that. But because of this development, and something else I'll address, is we talked about the future thoroughfare that is going to come in place. This project will, to some degree, initiate that. It's basically going to start that. It's going to create that intersection, start that first southern portion of that thoroughfare, and basically leave it open for continuation, which in the future, once in place, will alleviate a lot of the Riverhill traffic. So again, overall, just in summary, not a significant impact to the existing roadway system. But we see good things too. And I think that's really all I have. I know there's gonna be a lot of questions, so I don't know if we'll just continue with the presentation and then.
We'll just continue with the presentation. We'll have traffic questions, I'm sure.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Leslie Ostrander with D.R. Horton. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. At D.R. Horton, we pride ourselves in building a quality home for every stage in a family's life. And we are excited for the opportunity to do this in Kerrville and become a part of the Kerrville community. In this presentation, I've attached a few renderings and pictures of the types of entries and amenities we include in our typical communities. I'll go slow, unless you want me to go fast. So,
Whatever's comfortable for you.
okay. These are entry examples that we have in existing communities, both in San Antonio, Houston, Austin, Bernie, all of the surrounding communities. I also have attached a few pictures of some of our park and playground amenities. Then next, we included a few pictures of the types of houses we are proposing to build in Vintage Heights. I have floor plans and then actual pictures of houses based off of those floor plans that have been built in our Red River Ranch subdivision in Cibolo for you to look at.
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Is the landscaping included as part of your build-out package?
Yes, sir. I do have a list of kind of our standard included features that I was going to talk about.
Okay, thank you.
In just a minute. We will offer both one-story and two-story floor plans with various square footages ranging from 1,442 square feet to 2,678 square feet. We also have included a few pictures of what our interiors look like. So just to give you guys a couple of examples of what the actual product is that we're planning to build in Vintage Heights. I did want to go into a few of our standard features. It includes 75% masonry on the first floor, enhanced landscaping package including full yard irrigation, a 6-foot privacy fence, a covered patio, a 2-car garage, granite countertops, walk-in closets, and smart home features. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight, and I will be here if there are any additional questions.
All right,
Thank you.
Arden, can you switch to the other PowerPoint, please? Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Looking through this project, one of the first pieces we look at is the consistency with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan currently has this property designated as agriculture and outdoor tourism. That was based on the vacant property as it sat as the comprehensive plan was coming through the adoption process. Agriculture and outdoor tourism includes things such as camping, hunting, nature-based recreation activities, and large lot single-family subdivisions with other civic and institutional uses, parks, or open space. course, the existing area, as we're familiar, is single-family homes. Just a second. Both inside and outside the city limits. And then, of course, adjacent is Kerrville Shriner Park. With this request, they are looking for an amendment to the future land use plan. And staff recommends preservation residential place type. As we did mention, this project does have quite a bit of open space. Preservation residential place type in the future land use plan defines a dense cluster of housing surrounded by open space, similar to River Hills, similar to Comanche Trace, similar to the Summit, and similar to the proposed plat that we'll look at later on in this agenda as part of this proposal. Primary land use being single-family detached homes, patio homes, townhomes, or other single-family homes, or duplexes. The R2 is consistent with that place type. Kerrville 2050 plan, a comprehensive plan, is considered a living document. We don't adopt that plan and then just work off of it for 30 years. We do a continual review and update of those plans on a regular basis. Some of the non-scheduled reviews based on the zoning code, there's 4 different criteria that we can look at for an amendment to the future land use plan. One of those being the application represents a new and important opportunity for the community that deserves due consideration that was not known or anticipated at the time of the adoption of the plan. Another option would be decisions were made during the development of the comprehensive plan based on incorrect information. New information not available during the comprehensive plan has arisen or been developed, or conditions upon the comprehensive plan have changed to warrant consideration of the application. In this case, in the zone change before you, this application represents a new and important opportunity for the community that deserves the due consideration that was not known during the adoption of the comprehensive plan. Adjacent zoning. Current zoning is R1. Riverhill, as the adjacent portion of Riverhill, is zoned R1. Kerrville Shriner Park is zoned public and institutional. And across Highway 16 is outside the city limits. And you can see there's a vacant tract of land beyond that neighborhood that's also zoned R2. There's a list of the compared uses between R1 and R2. Here's a snapshot of the list of uses that are different. And as we talked about, or as the applicant talked about, there are varying housing types that are allowed in R2 that would not be allowed in R1. That includes the patio homes, townhomes, and duplexes. But their preliminary plat that they're proposing tonight does not include any of those lots. So they are proposing single-family homes. These single-family lots, as they mentioned, are over 5,000 square feet in area, which is the minimum for R1. The minimum for R2 is 4,500 square feet. The lot width they're proposing is 45, which is the minimum for R2. The lot width in R1 is 50 feet. And the setbacks are also different. R1 requires a 25-foot front and rear setback. The R2 allows for a 15-foot front and rear setback. The buildable area per lot is actually larger in an R2 zoning than it is in an R1 zoning based on those minimums. I'm looking at the thoroughfare plan. The thoroughfare plan was adopted with the comprehensive plan. That includes your arterials, your major access roads, most of which in Kerrville are state highways. That includes your collectors such as Riverhill Boulevard, Singing Winds, Lois, Jackson, and several other collector streets that are meant to gather that traffic within the neighborhood and get them to the arterial. And you can also see at the bottom of the screen there's a dotted red line from Highway 16 to Highway 27 that goes around Kerrville Shriner Park. And that is a proposed future arterial to make that connection to carry that through traffic.
Just a clarification, Drew. That arterial connects with Highway 173.
Oh, excuse me. Yes. Highway 16 to Highway 173. Thank you. That does not have an exact alignment. There is no exact proposal for that. However, this property and the plat that they proposed does dedicate a portion, roughly 1,000-foot portion of that arterial. So it does start the alignment at Highway 16 to make that connection eventually to 173. As far as the Riverhill Street Plan, Riverhill Boulevard was part of the original phase of Riverhill, which did connect from 16 to 173 as a collector. Riverhill was mostly developed in the county and then annexed into the city later on. First phase of Riverhill Estates was platted in 1975, and this does have the beginning of Green Tree, Hickory Hills, and Ridgewood, which would have been a continuation of the neighborhood. There's a replat of the Castle Pines block in 1997, which continues Green Tree with a future stub out for the continuation of the development. I don't know if you can see it on your screen. The bottom of that screen on the plat notes that there's an adjacent 499 acres that were part of the original property that developed Riverhill. So those three streets were built and designed to be a continuation of neighborhood, whether it's under the Riverhill subdivision or any future subdivision. Won't go too far into the traffic analysis, as the engineers already explained most of that, and much better than I can since I'm not a traffic engineer. But the summary does state that it has minimal impact on Riverhill and the adjacent intersections, both on Highway 16 and Riverhill Boulevard, all within acceptable levels of service. Out of the traffic engineering report, the level of service is graded like grades in school, A through F. Acceptable level of service is A through D, where you do have minimal delays at each of those intersections. Going through these again, at Highway 16 and Riverhill Boulevard, the peak period on westbound Riverhill is currently at a level B, and in the future full build out still maintains a level B. The average for all of those intersections is still an A. At Riverhill Boulevard and Green Tree, currently at an A and continues to be at an A. You can see that delay goes as far as 0.2 seconds to 2.2 second delay per intersection. This is the access number one. This is the internal collector, the Vintage Heights Avenue. At full build out would be a B for the westbound, but averages out to still be an A level of service. And the access point number two is similar. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions before or after the public hearing. As a part of the commission's consideration, please include the amendment to the future land use plan as part of your motion. That way the future land use plan and the zoning are in concert with one another.
All right. Okay, at this time at 5:20, I'm going to open the public hearing. And with the amount of folks that we have, we're going to need to limit our comments to 3 minutes. There are lights on the podium that will let you know when your time is getting close to being over. Please be very aware of the time that you speak. And I have about 20 requests to speak, and I'm going to go in basically the order that they were handed to me. When you come to the podium, please state your name and address. And the first speaker I have would be Douglas Holmes.
Good afternoon. I'm Doug Holmes, and I live at 217 Riverhill Boulevard. That's at the intersection of Riverhills Boulevard and Hickory Hills. So in other words, our property is in the direct firing line of this proposed development. I had some prepared notes to work from this afternoon, but based on the information that's been presented here, I have more questions than statements. One question that immediately comes to mind is the home values that were put up on the screen that were for $300,000 and less. How many of those properties are adjacent, as in directly adjacent to the proposed development? I know for sure my property is not a less than $300,000 property, and it is right next to that. The second question I have is that with all this goodwill for 40% green area, why is it necessary for this development to encroach directly up to existing property lines with no proposed buffer zone, setbacks, or separation of any kind? I can't help thinking that some of that set aside would be better used in protecting our property values with some form of buffer zone between us and this development. I was going to ask about things like the traffic study. City Council, as far as I'm aware, and I'm a new resident of only a few months, City Council already has acknowledged problems with the traffic and safety concerns on Riverhill Boulevard. And I'm sorry, the statistics presented here this afternoon about traffic are just overwhelming. It is impossible for us to believe that the addition of all of these new dwellings and the associated vehicles that go with them, the traffic study surely must look at an additional 500 or so, maybe even more, additional vehicles being on Riverhill Boulevard itself. There are no sidewalks, there are no bike trails. The city has already attempted to slow down procedures on Riverhill based on existing traffic flow. And nothing that's been said here this afternoon is persuading me that it's not going to become really dangerous out there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next speaker I have is Bill White.
Thank you very much. It's Bill White, 513 Riverhill Boulevard in Riverhill. Listening to the presentation, I'd like to make the point in two areas, one of which was touched on briefly. The first area, there's a comparison made in terms of zoning currently in Riverhill to these condos or whatever they are, and I'm here to tell you they're a dump. So to use that analogy and something that was allowed several years ago, 20 years ago, and what they've become, that leads to the obvious question, what guarantee, if any, is there that although the plan calls for a certain plotting, that can't be changed due to problems with the developer and sales of the houses? And the other thing I think is most important, and it was already hit on, is this issue of the Riverhill traffic. Anyone who thinks that the Riverhill traffic is not a problem just simply doesn't know what goes on in the real world. We've had these buffers put in, people have hit them, and you take 500 houses, 1.5 cars conservatively per house, that's 750 people that are going to be vehicles dumped into Riverhill Boulevard. To further exacerbate things, that cut through is right in the middle of the lane going to school. So you got all those kids that are going to school, especially the ones that wind up at Tybee, are going to be overloading Riverhill Boulevard and creating a safety hazard. In summary, I think, one other thing. I would suggest that these setbacks is a good idea, that no access be allowed into Riverhill Boulevard, and that until we get some kind of southern perimeter road up there, the connector between 16 and 173, that this whole plan be modified to give positive means that we can keep that traffic out of Riverhill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, Vivian Core? Okay. All right. Ralph English?
I'm not really reading anything on this. My name's Ralph English. I live at 105 Greenbrier Circle. That backs up directly to the property or subdivision that they're building. Right behind my home, there's a proposed 5 to 6, 8, actually 8 houses joining my property. If they build 2-story houses in back of me, they not only block my view that I typically have, they're gonna block the sky that I typically am able to look at. And I think it's bad that nobody took in consideration of this buffer zone that should have been in place when they designed this, so we wouldn't be impacted by this. I think it's kind of insane. My property falls right off of, what is it, Ridgewood and Greenbrier Circle. We're kind of like right on the corner. So the traffic that's going to be coming by me is going to be unbelievable. Right now, I enjoy the privacy up there, which I paid for when I got the property. And for someone to say that my property's not going to be devalued, they're seriously insane. Because right now I have a view, I have animals back there, I can enjoy the quiet, and that's all going to be gone. That's why we bought it. And when I bought it, we put in over $175,000 in investment additionally to our property when we bought it. And this investment's going to be gone. I'm not going to get it back. And if they believe it is, they can buy my property for what I paid for it and live in it themselves. But there's going to be a lot of cars passing by me. There's probably like 150 homes right in that area that are going to exit right there on Riverhill Boulevard going right and left. I walk my dogs there daily, and I can tell you right now it's dangerous. I've almost been hit several times. One time it was late at night when cars raced through there at high speed, trying to go not the right direction around those little barriers they have, but going the opposite way because it's much shorter and there's no cars on the other side. And I happened to be on the left-hand side when he should have been going on the right. And I had a truck brush my shoulder, the rearview mirror brushed my shoulder as he came around that side as if he didn't even see me at all. And I had my 2 dogs ready to cross the road. I could have been killed. These people speed through there because what they're trying to do is get through one of the barriers and speed through to get to the next one and then speed up to get through. They're trying to cut the time in half. So it's not a safe place to be. And when I walk my dogs, I find out also that the white lines that are there on Riverhill Boulevard, I keep my dogs way within the white lines, and I have people riding the white lines next to me as they drive by there. Now, the increase in traffic is only going to make this worse, and I have no place to enjoy the things that I enjoy now, and as tough as it is. That's all I got. But.
Thank you. Just quickly I meant to say this before when I opened the meeting. I do have public comments that were sent to the city regarding this plat, so I want to make sure everybody knows that we did receive those. I also have a petition with about 80 signatures representing about 40 addresses that are not in favor. I just wanted to let everybody know that we did receive that petition. Next speaker, Cynthia Anderson.
I'm Cynthia Anderson. My husband Albert and I live at 201 Castle Pines in Riverhill at the corner of Green Tree and Castle Pines. We're here today to voice our opposition to any of these side entrances into this new proposed subdivision if it goes through. We've seen Comanche Trace with one entrance off 173, and it seems to work very well. I would like to see Highway 16 as the only entrance to this development. with the possible exception of that new artery that may be the thoroughfare that they mentioned that might be connecting the 173 and 16. More specifically, we are very opposed to the extension of Green Tree Lane as an entrance to this subdivision because it is so close to Highway 16. Someone coming from 16 turning onto Riverhill, it is the first immediate turn right. So I see Green Tree being the most heavily used entrance into the subdivision, even for people coming home from work or whatever, coming south on 16 from town. Even if they could go down to the main entrance on 16, they will use whatever cut-throughs they can. And that will be, Green Tree will be the first one in. So we see that one being very heavily used. We see trucks using Riverhill Boulevard now that are not supposed to be on the road unless they're delivering products, but they will have a legitimate reason to say, but we're on this because we're delivering loads of lumber, whatever, to these new houses. So it will hugely impact Riverhill Boulevard in all three of these entrances that are proposed. Again, we see Comanche Trace having only one entrance that works very well. Please confine Vintage Heights to entrances on Highway 16. And those are our points.
Like I said, we still have probably another 15 speakers to go. There may be some folks in favor, but just for time's sake, and I don't want to deny anybody a chance to have their opinion heard, but if there is anybody in the audience so far that wants to comment on something that hasn't been spoken to as far in regards to traffic and property values and lines of sight, is there anybody in the audience that has another comment? Okay. Well, we'll keep going then. Peggy McKay.
Peggy McKay, 103 Westchester. The current classification of outdoor tourism has been described as our classification for this property, and the description is large lots, tracts of undeveloped land, and that is the perfect description of what abuts both sides of this property. And though the streets have been stubbed into this new development, it didn't mean that the quality or the pricing of house was determined, but we would have expected that it would be a like development. In the 2050 plan, which has been mentioned, with all the participants in agreement, the first action was planned to be infill, where infrastructure was already in place. And the first three projects that have come before you, I assume, have all required an extension of infrastructure. The 2050 plan also states, which wasn't mentioned, it's imperative to protect existing neighborhoods, stay true to local aesthetics, new development should be compatible with the existing character of the community. 3, one of Kerrville's most distinctive features is beautiful natural landscaping and should not only be celebrated, but protected. And the open land in this property, I suspect, is the steep slopes where it would be more costly to build. Area 10, which we are, is not in the strategic catalyst area, nor the preferred growth area. There's no indication on the plat, well, now there is, of the collector from 16 to 173, which has long been promised. In the highway department surveys, they referred to a neighborhood street as 40 feet wide. That describes Riverhill Boulevard. We're 40 feet wide. They say it should be 60 feet wide, divided highway. We're 2 lanes. And there is a caveat there where in constrained areas, and constrained is described as forced, cramped, and unnatural areas, it may be an undivided road. The 2050 plan states future land use plan plus the strategic catalyst area maps and summary sheets plus thoroughfare plan form the underpinnings of the entire 2050 plan. So far, the plan has been ignored. One might suspect it's being successfully gutted. As with the summit, we will have increased density changes in our quality of life, and we want the open area, not the wall to wall. And also critical to us, where is the water supply coming? You may have 510 homes, but if you multiply that by 2.5 residents, you've got over 1,200 people requiring water. We don't have it.
Thank you. Carrie Sutton.
Kerry Sutton, 406 Meadow Ridge, in Kerrville, not in Riverhill. I am here representing my company today, Hill Country Telephone Cooperative. And quite frankly, we need homes for employees. In a nutshell, some of our people just need a local place to live. We have roughly 110 employees. 15 to 20% of our employees live outside of Kerr County, and they commute inside, mostly from San Antonio. And one, I've learned today, commutes as far as New Braunfels. Obviously, that means we are a good employer. I would like to think we're a good employer. People will drive all that way for our company, and we certainly would like to retain these employees as best as we can. All these employees that commute are certainly at risk of changing employers simply due to the commute and the hassle that goes along with it. Maybe some of us in this room have commuted to San Antonio, and it's just not something we'd like to do. So 510 new homes might allow more employees at Hill Country Telephone to have places to live. It might allow us also just to hang on to better employees or the good employees that we have, and that makes the community better for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Charles Paul.
Charles Paul, my home's at 203 Riverhill. I also own property at 200 and 204 Castle Pines. I think the major problem presented by this proposed development is the traffic and the noise on Riverhill. And I'm going to get it both ways from Green Tree, which my property abuts. I'd like to direct a question to the gentleman who did the traffic study. I saw a date of August 2019. Is that when the study was performed?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay, so that was when the school was out. Is that correct?
No, we never collect data from school down.
So school was in session in August?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
No, actually, we collected data way before then.
Okay.
So and I can tell you the date of the data.
I just want to point
Study was
out,
finished.
I think, first of all, I want to talk about the notice that was provided. I understand that 54 letters were sent out to adjacent properties, and of those, I believe only 6 of those were in Riverhill Boulevard. Now, there are approximately 65 home sites in Riverhill, so many people who's major stakeholders in this matter didn't get notice. But I want to say that the traffic in Riverhill is a problem. It's unsafe. I think if you take into consideration the traffic that school provides, if you talk to anybody in Riverhill, since they opened up the Tybee campus, the traffic has increased substantially. Now, we're going to have a middle school opening up in 2021. That's just going to probably double that morning and afternoon traffic. Now, they talk about Riverhill as a collector street. I don't think it was intended to be a collector street for people taking shortcuts. Instead of driving down to Medina Highway, they're cutting through from Ranchero Road, camp meeting through Riverhill. It is a safety problem because a year ago, I think one of my neighbors is here today, a driver going at an excessive speed lost control and took out our utility cluster. And if it weren't for that cluster, I think that the car could have easily gone into the neighbor's house. Cars are speeding up and down from that westernmost traffic circle down to Highway 16. And despite the new ordinance that's supposed to prevent pass-through trailer trucks, I don't see that being enforced. Every morning, you can hear the rattling trailers racing down at 40+ miles per hour. So that's my primary concern. I know there's a need for affordable housing in town. I know that as of today, Realtor.com had listings of 68 properties for less than $250,000. So I don't know if that's really representative of the housing shortage. There are affordable homes out there. I would strongly urge that you not approve the rezoning, and I would not want to see this development at all because it's going to change the whole character of our neighborhood and it will affect our property values. Thank you.
Is Bruce Strachey? Yeah. Oh, he left. Okay. Larry Petty?
Yes, hello. I'm Larry Petty. My wife and I, Charlotte, live at 246 Castle Pines. It's right at the end of the cul-de-sac. And I understand that we do need, the housing. I just don't understand why we need it right there. And I was mainly going to address the trafficking problem. I don't want to be so redundant with that. But people are creatures of, I want the easiest, shortest, simplest way to get there. Even if you have that southern route across there, people that are going to exit off on 16 are still they're going to go towards town. And with the schooling, like was just said, and all that, the traffic on that is going to be so increased to cut across there, get to 173, and get to the loop to go out that way. That's going to be a big deal. Since its inception, Riverhill Boulevard has been a problem with traffic. You have the three streets dumping right into it, and then even the ones that go off on the 16 highway side, they're going to come, and there's still some of those are going to cut across. There's no way that it's not going to really impact the danger of that, the noise factor, the pollution, and certainly the quality of life of that whole neighborhood. It was a residential street. It should be used as a residential street and not as an artery going through there. And there's no way that this is not going to impact that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, just in an effort to try and conserve time, because we still have 3 other agenda items to address after this one. Could we take a vote by a show of hands of the number of people in this room who are against this subdivision being approved? Please hold your hands quick. $45 against, unless some of you were holding up 2 hands. If you're willing, are there any folks in favor of this development that hasn't had a chance to speak? Would you raise your hands? We have 6, 4. Is there anybody in favor of this development that wrote down on the speaker request form that hasn't had a chance to speak that would like to? Okay. Is there anybody that wrote down on the speaker request form that feels like their voice has not been heard and would like to speak? Yes, ma'am, what's your name?
Brady Lehman.
Okay, please come forward.
Hello, my name's Brady Lehman. I live at 211 Castle Pines. I am not retired, just for the record. And I would just like to point out that I know that we need housing, but to my knowledge, aren't there 53 acres ready off of Holter Drive for efficiency apartments, 64 for townhomes and apartments, and 75 acres for garden-style family homes? Holter Drive is 4 lanes with medians and sidewalks on both sides, walking distances to schools, parks, and everything else. Riverhill is not. You have to cross major highways to get to any school. That being said, along with the traffic, it causes problems. It's going to be a disaster. I can't even walk my dog down Riverhill Boulevard, let alone my soon-to-be child. So we moved to Riverhill because you can do those things. And with all of these upcoming homes, I mean, we're being generous. It's going to be 1,000+ cars going down there every day. They're not going to go up 16 to go back around and come down through a thoroughfare. They're just not. And so that being said, I feel like there's a better way. We need to be responsible and grow responsibly. Y'all are going to have to add a traffic light, probably a couple. Those are expensive. Sidewalks and everything else just to make it safe for everyone that's wanting to move here. That being said, I relinquish my time.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak, felt like they haven't had a chance? Yes, sir. And what's your name?
My name's Frank Walczewski, and I live at 200 Riverhill. And so, I understand the study that was done, traffic study that was done, and, those are statistics. But as several of the other speakers have talked about, as I've listened to them, it's not just the traffic, it's the quality of the traffic that comes through there. And I live on Riverhill, and I see these people just, guns blazing driving through there. So, Riverhill, we've lived there for 7 years, and in the 7 years we've lived there, we have seen many efforts to try to manage the traffic and the speed. And we're all aware of all the different efforts that we've had. In the most recent one is we have these lame little roundabouts, but they do no good. So anything that is going to add additional traffic on Riverhill, I am opposed to. However, if there is something, and maybe the developer needs to work with the city more so, but the artery that would connect 16 to 173, that sounds like a much more viable. I think a lot of people would probably agree with me. That would be a much more viable, and build that prior to the development. So anyway, thank you. That's all I have to say.
All right. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name's Robert Gulke. I moved here from San Antonio 3 years ago. I could have bought anywhere I wanted here. I looked at Comanche Trace. I looked at Saddlewood. I've got friends in both. I looked at Riverhill. I like the estate environment. My estate, because that's what I call it, is on Castle Pines Drive on that cul-de-sac. And I've got 3.5 lots. I know that their lots are, 5,000 square feet? My house is bigger than that lot. And my house butts up to I've got so much fence line along there. There's no way my house is going to increase with $180,000 to $230,000 houses. I have a really big question, and y'all need to answer it. Where I am, y'all have a big circle where that big hill is? Because I know y'all don't want to build on the hill. I mean, it's nice to leave that for parks and that, and that's wonderful. But we know if you don't fool anybody, it's too expensive to build there. You couldn't put a $200,000 house on that. You might do a road up there for that price. But what is that big circle? Because I understand just the little bit that I've lived here, I've heard so much about traffic on Riverhill. I've done a few walks, but I'm not real up on that. know that water has been a major problem. Banshee Trace, I think one of those towers is theirs. What I'm concerned about is there's a big circle between my fence and that big hill. Is that a water treatment plant?
No.
Sanitary control.
Sanitary, so rumor has it y'all are gonna start recycling poop, and we're gonna start drinking that. No, I'm serious, I've heard that. Well, okay, you said a treatment plant? What is that?
Oh, so there was an existing well there.
No, there's a well, yes.
Come to the mic, Jared.
Because that's gonna be right over my fence, I can throw a rock to it. Yeah, there's that circle. Back it up.
Over here.
Well, my 3 minutes is gonna be gone.
Well,
But yeah, I just wanna know what that is too, because, and the idea of a buffer would be really nice, because I've got a really nice high fence. And then if everybody's gonna be putting all these track homes right up against my fence, and then putting 6-foot cedar fences that last about 8 or 10 years, and then 80% of them don't fix them, and it looks like, you know how it is. I moved from track homes. That's why I wanted an estate here. And I love it here. Wish I'd have moved here a long time ago. Kerrville's beautiful. We need affordable housing. But why put it next to Riverhill? This lady over here talked about how they could do that. Anyway.
just a second. Drew, what was that circle loaded on that plat?
That is a easement for an existing water well. So it's a sanitary control easement to protect the groundwater for that well.
Okay. It's not a water treatment plant, it's a well.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Yes, Mike. Could you come to the podium, please?
My name's Mike Sigerman. I live at 4,000 Comanche Trace Drive. My question is, if P&Z turns down the zoning change from R1 to R2, does the developer still have the right to develop the property the way he wants to? Number one. And number two, does he still have the ability to connect the arteries that he's going to use coming out of development in Riverhill?
Okay.
That's the question, because the question about this is, are you going to grant a variance to R2, which changes a little bit about how he develops? But he has R1 zoning right now. Does he have the ability to develop that into 700 homes without any variance whatsoever? And would he have the ability to connect to Riverhill? That's my question.
Yes, you would.
I can
Could you answer that?
Yes, with the R1 zoning in place, it could develop that. The lots would have to be a minimum of 50 feet wide instead of 45. It would change the setback per lot. And per our subdivision policy, he would actually required to connect to those existing streets.
But would you have to get approval to go through Riverhill? Or can you just, you mean, for if you keep it R1, you can go through Riverhill?
Any development on this property is required to connect to those existing streets.
But it's not required to go through Riverhill. Is that the only way you can get there? Or could you have two on Highway 16? Or, I mean, does it automatically mean that you would be able to go through Riverhill?
They would be required to connect to those streets.
To Riverhill?
To the existing street stubs, they are required to connect so that they are not dead-end streets.
Not to Highway 173 or to have two?
And they could have access to Highway 16. Yes. Sorry, you're gonna have to come to the podium if you're gonna speak. You don't have to.
Okay. All right, would you like to speak, ma'am?
Yeah, I
Yes,
just want to ask a
quickly.
question, basically.
Quickly.
But you said that it is required for this subdivision to move forward to use those streets, the green tree and the other two streets.
Yes, based on our subdivision regulations, the division of land for these plats, those existing street stubs were provided to connect to the adjacent development. Just like any other development in town, as you build, you don't block off each development. So they are required to use those streets. How they connect to them and the layout is up to them as long as it meets the subdivision standards.
So you're saying it is a requirement, not an option, but an absolute requirement?
Yes, it is a requirement for them to connect.
Okay, because that's really the problem is the traffic. Like on Green Tree, when we pull out to go onto Riverhill, you take your life in your hands. It is very dangerous. It doesn't matter if you're turning left or right. It's so close to 16, the cars come in there, right in, and boom, they're there, and you can't see them until they're about ready to hit you. So that needs to be considered, because you're gonna have fatalities. If you have more traffic, it's bad enough the way it is. But if the traffic builds up, then you're gonna have people trying to get out there faster. And it's very dangerous.
Okay.
And the thing is, I would not be as opposed if you would have 16 as the entrance.
Sorry, I need your name and address for the record.
Could you kind of speak up a little closer? So that,
Carol Cassell's, 111 Castle Pines.
okay, I'm gonna let this one man speak.
Yeah, mine has nothing, I don't live in Riverhill and has nothing to do with traffic.
Okay, please state your name and address.
My name is Ronnie Carroll and I live at 3577 La Cumbre. And I'd just like to express my concern about the city of Kerrville lowering its standards. The land we're discussing was zoned for large single-family lots. The present city government and other community people have decided this was a mistake. I can see how the real estate community, title companies, mortgage companies would be in favor of this. However, I feel that when this was zoned, the city government and city leaders felt this was best for Kerrville. And I think it still is. The buzzword of the day is workforce housing. This assumes that the lack of low-priced housing is a reason our businesses have difficulty finding employees. I submit this problem is a result of a national unemployment rate of 3.7%, Texas unemployment rate of 3.4%. It's almost full employment. Housing and affordability is a national dilemma. This is due to tariffs, material prices, government regulations, and labor availability. I was a home builder in Houston for 39 years and had very few labor problems. My son is building there now, and he and the other builders are having difficulty with skilled craftsmen and wages, and I'm sure the Kerrville builders have the same. I don't believe building cheaper houses will serve Kerrville's labor problems. To allow 5,000 square foot lots would be lowering our city's standards. If a university lowered their admission standards or a company lowered their hiring standards, would this make a better college or a better company? This is basically what Kerrville will be doing. Kerrville is a great city, and it's a great city because the standards and expectations that previous community leaders set. I love its heritage, its hill country beauty, its traditions. That's why I moved here. Let's not downgrade this grand and beautiful city by reducing our lot size or our building standards. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Jack Pratt.
My name's Jack Pratt, 105 Deerwood in Riverhill, not affected by this development. I live on the other side behind the tennis courts. We need low-income housing. Affordable housing depends on who's buying it and who's got much money. We need low-income housing, and I can tell you that the comparables that I saw up on the screen for the houses that were sold in Riverhill are houses that were over 25 years old. Therefore, when you buy that house, you got another $200,000 to put into it. So those numbers don't make sense to us. Now, when those houses are sold, they have to be upgraded. So you add another 25 to 50% to the cost of the house. Question I have is, and I haven't seen anything about the developer paying for sidewalks and streetlights, or is the citizens of Kerrville going to be paying developer cost? HOA was mentioned. So the question is, what percent of the houses or the lots must be sold before the homeowners take control of the homeowners association? We need to know that. Usually, sometimes you'll see developers come in and the homeowners don't have any say-so until 66% of the lots are sold. We are an old age community. We're a retirement community. And we came here for the peace and quiet. Now, most of you know I was mayor. And when I was mayor, Riverhill Boulevard was one of the biggest things I had to tackle. It was because of noise from traffic, from construction trailers, from students traveling, from taking the shortcut. And for those of you living in Riverhill, that sign that's on Riverhill Boulevard off of 16 that says weight limitation, that is an illegal sign. There's no such thing as weight limitation on that collector street. Am I correct? Okay. It was not put there by the city. Another question I have is about fire hydrants. I know where I live in High Ridge, we got a fire hydrant that hadn't been in operation for over 5 years because of not the water pressure. I got a light that's getting ready to buzz in 30 seconds. I'm going to need somebody's, give me some of their time. Okay. The cut through is a disaster. So we need to make sure that that doesn't happen with these, if this is approved. Hopefully it's not. Now, the city has 88 acres that when I was mayor, I offered it to a developer for the city to take it off, and the city would donate that land, 88 acres, to build low-income housing. City needs to reconsider that for a developer to come in and build homes, and the city be a partner in it and donate the land to the developer and build low-income housing. Okay, that's the way you get low-income housing.
Okay, Mr. Pratt.
I think I'll yield from there.
All right. Okay, we've been listening for an hour and a half, and we even took a vote. We had 45 against the plat, and we've had 6 for. I think commissioners, we've got a pretty good feel for what the room is looking at.
3 more people.
Okay, 3 more. Okay. And we also had 14 people outside the room that were opposed, just to clarify. Your name again, ma'am?
Nancy D. Young.
Okay.
I live at 725 Oakland Hills Lane. I've owned my home since 1983, right there at Riverhill, and I'm very happy there. I'm very fortunate to be on the golf course, the creek and the lake, and all the water facilities right around me where I watch the wildlife. I want to bring that to the attention of developers, that the wildlife has to be considered because it's in my face every day. And others who live there complain a bit about it, but it is beautiful and we've managed to take care of it. And those beautiful horns on those deers, which you talked about the hunting being an asset in Kerrville. And when you build that up, new development, that's gonna push more of the animals down on us for the water, or where are they gonna go? Back up the hill. There may not be water up there. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Question about the map.
Okay, would you please step up to the podium and state your name and address?
My question is, I wish I could tell where Riverhill is, where the concentration of houses are in comparison to the green space, because it looks like many of these houses are very close to Riverhill Boulevard. And even though the traffic study says, 70% will go out Highway 16, and that's the one with the internal delay. Well, if they know they can save 2 seconds, they will take Riverhill and go out Highway 16, go out Riverhill exit where there is no delay. And also, if their homes are closer to Riverhill Boulevard, they aren't going to backtrack to the village, community, whatever it is, street out to Highway 16. They'll take Riverhill. Also, so many of these kids have students, they will go to Tybee, they're going to want to go south. So I really think your 70% heading north because they work in Kerrville is inaccurate. I think far more are going to be going south, or they're going to be going north, but they're going to take a shortcut to save 8 seconds of not waiting for the internal delay. And I don't know, not everybody works in the heart of downtown. Many of them work at the VA hospital or at Tybee or farther south. So I don't think you can take some computer app that says the busiest road will absorb this much. We live here, we know how the traffic pattern goes. And that's very different. And the other thing is exactly what Jack Pratt said, that the home values, it's a false premise to say that the homes here now are worth this. The sold price, everyone who buys it pours money into it. So you're very inaccurate. And the pictures I saw from Horton, those homes don't look like the quality of Riverhill. They don't have the appearance, and therefore that will lower the property values. So that's all I want to say, that I don't think the traffic flow is accurate.
Thank you.
I don't know if you'll be able to see some of this, but my name's Kim Cochran, and I just bought a property on Castle Pines. I don't want to cry about it.
Can't hear you.
Speak up, please. Okay.
Louder.
Is there a microphone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's above you.
Yes.
Oh, it is, okay. Well, anyway, my name's Kim Cochran, and I live on Castle Pines. And I just bought one of these houses. Sorry. Anyway, I bought a house next door to her. And when I bought that, this land was plotted, and I made sure before these acreages between, between 11 acres and, gotta put my glasses on, looks like 19 acres. This is what it's been plotted for. And this is what it is currently, right now. One house per acreage. Okay, so that I agree with. That takes care of the wildlife problem. It takes care of a traffic flow problem because they don't even have, I don't believe that they have any traffic even coming off the traffic. The entrance to this is off 16. Okay, so this is current. The other thing is talking about housing. Well, the other thing is you just spoke about the homes. Now, this is, I believe, one of these, and I hope you don't mind I'm holding up your home, but I saw this on the internet. This home right now overlooks, you can see what it overlooks. Okay, can you see that? It overlooks a tremendous amount of land. It's beautiful. That's the land we're talking about. This is what he's going to be looking at. This is Sedora Ridge, I believe. This is, my son has a house here, so that's fine. I get it. But this is what he's going to look at. And look at his home. He's gonna be looking at this. Joanne will be looking at this. I know it is. That's why I said sorry. And then I saw that on the internet. It's gorgeous, you know? And so, you know, that house, I don't know what it's to be sold for, you know, but yeah, I guess.
Don't say anything, I don't want my taxes to go.
I know, I'm sorry.
But I'm just saying that it's like the same concern for me because we bought that house.
Let's let her speak first.
I'll
Okay. So anyway, I bought this house. Well, I want to go on. I'll just quickly say I bought this house. I have some health issues, and you know, I made sure I looked and looked and looked. And you can ask my realtor for so long to find the perfect home that would give me the peace and quiet that I need to heal. So I knew that right behind there is where water will run for this particular neighborhood, for these lots here. These lots, that water main, what have you, will run right behind our homes. I knew there was going to be some construction to get underneath all that concrete and everything to put that in. So I was aware of that. But what I thought was going to be a 13-acre plot of land behind me with one house is turning out to be a cul-de-sac of like 8 houses plus other houses down this way and other houses down this way right up to my property. And so that's, what, 2 to 6 years, 4 years? I don't even know how long that I'm going to have to listen all day long to that until sunset, sunrise to sunset, all day long to that construction. So that's worrisome for me.
All right.
You know, and then the other thing is,
Ma'am,
someone mentioned, I have
we
to
gotta-
ask you, this is important. The other thing is, the city, I read, is already taking proposals to build out that 80-somewhat lots that the mayor had mentioned. There's like 84 acres that the city's already taken proposals to build these exact kind of homes right there by the middle school that they're building, right there. So we're already getting those kind of houses already. And who's to say that Kerrville's going to be able to support this many homes in addition to that? Plus there's 60-somewhat on Zillow. You know, so, you know, I don't think, I mean, I don't know, but
Okay.
I don't think.
Ma'am, your time is up.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, but I guess I want to ask a question. Is that true?
Okay.
Has the city been taking proposals for that, to build that out into workforce housing, they call it?
There is an open RFP for the 35 acres across the street from the middle school, yes.
Okay, so they're already going to be putting in houses like this.
I don't know what the proposals will be, but
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to take one more speaker. Yes, sir. Have you filled out a speaker request form?
My name is Al Cassels. I live at 111 Castle Pines. I have 25 years' experience in economic development. I've seen many subdivisions side by side in a community. I've never seen one that goes through one to get to the other. Unless there's a barrier, like a stone wall, or some kind of fencing separating the two so you know that you are in one subdivision or the other. Now, last summer, they put the water line in the end of Green Tree to the new subdivision. Trucks and heavy equipment parked in front of the house many days. I talked to the contractor, and he said they're gonna leave the land exactly as it was when they're finished. Now I look out my backyard, 10 feet away, there's a pile of rocks and dirt, 10, 12 feet high. They've never been back, they've never did anything different. And a question I would ask, these models that you talked about, those are models, that's not real life. I mean, they're like weather forecasters, you can predict anything. But many people said, most traffic's coming off 16 right into Green Tree. They're not gonna go up over that hill and go, they're gonna go in and go right into the subdivision. And are there any barriers that are gonna separate the two communities? You know?
No, they're not.
Nothing? So it's just gonna be merged into one? You can have your own HOA?
There'll be some signage, we can add some signage, but that's all we can do.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. At 6:16, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you, everybody who had spoke. I feel commissioners have a pretty good sense of what your concerns are. Commissioners, do you have questions that you would like to ask Mr. Paxton or any of the presenters?
Drew?
Yes.
Okay, so what could the developer build right now as of today with no approval?
In the R1 zoning, again, the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. The minimum width per lot is 50 feet. The minimum front setback is 25 and the minimum rear setback is 25. Both zoning districts, the side setback is 5 feet.
So the footprint of the home would be?
At a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet, 50 by 100, the minimum or the maximum buildable footprint would be 2,000 square feet.
Now, could they do that without the change to the future land use plan?
The current zoning is R1, so yes, they could.
So can you explain what the purpose of changing that is? I don't understand it.
So the future land use plan, of course, citywide, looking at different areas, was based on information that we had at the time. The property owner was working on the previous layout with the large lots, with it being existing open space. Several other proposals for this property had not come to fruition, and that was in progress at the time. Was identified as the outdoor tourism and agriculture.
And that allows R1?
And that does allow for R1. And the previous zoning, before the adoption of the Kerrville 2050 plan and the new zoning code, was R1. The only change from the previous zoning code to the current zoning code was the lot size did decrease from 6,000 to 5,000. But that would be the only change that occurred through that process.
Explain the 6,000 to 5,000 again?
The previous zoning code minimum in R1 was 6,000.
Okay, and the new code is 5,000.
And the new code is 5,000. And that's in response to the Kerrville 2050 plan and the public input there.
So if we did not change, if we denied the request, it'd still stay at R1. The developer could still build the same number of lots that they have in their program. They would just end up having to take up more of the green space to accommodate those numbers of lots.
That's correct.
Okay.
What was the previous plat, preliminary plat approved? The
It
larger
actually was
acres?
approved through a development agreement with City Council. So they had several different waivers to the subdivision regulation because it was large lots. There were no internal streets, all private access through either the existing street stubs in Riverhill or Highway 16. But that was a development agreement through City Council, and they actually did not go through the platting process.
And if they were to come back with a new plat, a preliminary plat that met the current zoning, that would not be a public hearing, that would be consideration and action, correct?
That is correct.
So what is the purpose of the change from R1 to R2 is purely a setback issue?
The lot width and the setbacks.
And setback.
Unless you guys had anything else on that question.
Drew, there was a question regarding, I think just to understand the orientation of these lots and where Riverhill is. Could you bring up the slide and again explain where Riverhill Boulevard is compared to where the streets that are feeding from this development onto Riverhill are?
I'll show a couple. So the black line here is Riverhill Boulevard from 173 to 16. You can see light gray, this is Castle Pines. And the property starts here, runs along between 16 and Kerrville Shriner Park, and then comes down to the proposed arterial
from 16 to 173, that dotted red line.
Show where the homes are concentrated.
Yeah, just one second. Mhm. I'm going the wrong way, excuse me. That one may be a little easier to see. This one is slightly rotated. This is Castle Pines, and Riverhill Boulevard would be right here.
I have a point of clarification.
Wait a
Yes.
minute, excuse me. Could you go back to that previous slide? That didn't look like the right place for Riverhill Boulevard.
Sorry, this one is rotated slightly.
It's nothing like this.
This one's north is straight up. So Castle Pines,
So where are the existing properties on Riverhill Boulevard related to that plan?
Castle Pines is this top section here. And then north of that is Riverhill Boulevard.
Where, show me where the intersection of Riverhill Boulevard and Hickory Hills.
That last slide that you were at, Drew.
This is Green Tree right here. And I'll do it on the other slide as well. This is Hickory Hills. And this is Ridgewood Drive. This one, this is Green Tree Lane, Hickory Hills, and Ridgewood Drive.
Okay, and there were some other concerns about infrastructure and water uses. Has the city looked at that regarding this property?
The engineers for the project have been working with city engineers on a preliminary civil infrastructure design. There is available infrastructure and water supply to this property. The part of that would be the existing water line that was put in for the fire hydrants along Highway 16, and part of that is coming off the back side of the property. Two different water mains. Is that correct?
And
Sorry?
Yes, it's been inspected, it's not yet accepted.
What about sewage?
Sewage as well.
Sewage, there is capacity in the existing sewer mains, and anything into the property, the property owner will be installing.
will there be sidewalks in the subdivision? Okay.
Yes, there will be sidewalks along the streets. They are standard width streets, 50 foot for the residential streets and 60 foot for the collector. The arterial, they have dedicated half the width at 50 feet for a total of 100 feet for that future arterial. And talk about a couple other comments real quick. Riverhill Boulevard, again, was built in the county, so it was slightly different standards than it was if it had been built inside the city limits. Collector streets are not intended to carry that pass-through from one highway to the other. It's intended to collect the neighborhood traffic. The city has done several efforts to try to mitigate that pass-through traffic, again, from many of the other county residents getting into town. That is one of the main purposes of that future arterial south of Kerrville Shriner Park. Mouse back here.
When will that be built?
From Highway 16 carrying over to Highway 173. Obviously, the size of that project, it is a long-term project. We do not have a timeline for that. Those will be addressed on a regular basis with City Council as to when those capital projects come forward. A large percentage of that is based on demand, on the development of the area, and how much relief that would provide other streets. This being a first segment of that road could be a trigger to move that project up in priority.
And with the addition
Can I
of
get a clarification here, please? Bill White, going back to the impact of allowing or not allowing this with changes, if I understand this correctly, it's not complete the way it was explained, because if this zoning change is made, then if this project gets in trouble, the developer goes out, another developer can come in with those other kinds of houses in here, and yes, there's no recourse at all having to go back for zoning changes or anything. So if that's correct, then you need to consider that.
Thank you.
So the zoning would may or may not have to come back depending upon what any future development would propose. The plat would still have to come back through the city and planning and zoning commission to redo that plat or amend that plat.
Okay.
So what you're saying, excuse me if I'm wrong, but what I hear you saying is that the change in zoning is not a real problem here. A real problem is the way that that area, regardless of zoning, is currently proposed to be developed. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I understand.
This afternoon, whether it's zone 1 or zone 2, does not affect what this landowner can do relative to the plats that we've been shown today. Is that a correct statement?
The plat shown today is consistent with the R2 standards. To be consistent with the R1 standards would be minimal changes in the number of lots, because the minimum width would go from 45 feet to 50 feet in the current zoning, which would be just a straight linear frontage would be a 10% decrease in lot size. Given the different contours and streets, that may not be exactly 10%, but at this layout with a slightly larger lot, it would still be between 450 and 500 lots. Does that answer your question?
Inasmuch as it clarifies what we're trying to prevent, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
What's a minimum length if the minimum width is 50 in R1?
100 feet. The minimum square footage is still 5,000.
Okay.
I have a question. So, my name is Jason Lozano, and I live in 2260 Medina Highway. I know most of you guys live in Riverhill. But my question is, you know, it says that you guys are gonna be taking off 200 feet from my property. Is that from the road extending in? Because that would take away most of my stuff in there, most of my property. So the owner, you know, trying to preserve his 40%. I have a little land in there.
Right. Let me clarify. The solid red line on this map is the property owner's property.
Right.
The dashed line is that 200-foot notification. That's state law that we are required to notify any property owner within 200 feet. So it's just a notification. We're not taking any land. We're just notifying you that this was coming before the planning commission.
Sir, I have a question. On the map, the top right, where it zigs, and that's where the 3 connectors will be into Riverhill?
Yes.
How many miles do you have along Highway 16? 2? With only 1 entrance? Why don't you put more entrances to Highway 16? So they don't have to come to Riverhill?
Sure. Mike Wellborn, Wellborn Engineering and Surveying, 631 Water Street. We have 2 connection points on 16, and that's all we're allowed. We have to do separation by TxDOT requirements, and so we've met that separation distance. And there actually is not 1, there's 2 access points.
The other one's on the downside.
Correct, and it is in phases. With phase 1, there's gonna be 1 access to 16, and phase 2, there'll be another.
Mike, would you be able to show on here where the phases are?
Sure. Let's see, scrolling. Who's scrolling? That one. Okay. So right now, this is phase 1A. This section, you see this dotted line? So this is phase 1A. And that connector you were talking about will be connected and built with this phase. So all of this will be part of this collector street, this Highway 16. Phase 2 will be this section over here. Phase 3C, or actually, sorry, 1C, this is 1A, 1B, 1C. And then phase 2 is all of this. This will be at a later date because it does require some lift stations, so we can't begin with this section. We have to build some sanitary sewer lift stations. We do have a preliminary layout of that.
Are you saying TxDOT is dictating the distance, or that's the minimum distance?
TxDOT requires 500 feet minimum separation distance, or if the speed along there was 60, there would be 600 feet. But,
Between entrances?
yes, sir, between drive approaches, correct.
Have you considered doing the phase 2 first and seeing how?
Ma'am, we can't do that. That's economically the wrong direction because we have to build all the infrastructure to get to phase 2, and so
You can't build the infrastructure in that section.
it's not economical, no, ma'am.
How much money would it cost the builders to do it that way?
I think it's just,
Anything else?
it's economically unfeasible at this point to go that route. I have a question for the developer, Chuck. I know you can't answer specifically, but is there an anticipated time frame on the build out of phase 1A, 1B, and then 1C?
Yes, phase 1A, our first part of those lots would be a 40 lot takedown to D.R. Horton, and that would be approximately 1 year from now. And then there would take down 30 lots per quarter thereafter.
Okay. All right.
I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Would you consider some type of buffer? Is that feasible at all, or larger lots along Riverhill?
We would certainly consider that. We've looked at a lot of different options. And, you know, quite honestly, we want to do anything to work with our neighbors. This is the best plan based on the topography of the property. Unfortunately, the more level areas are located adjacent to Riverhill. But we would be open to, you know, any alternatives. The problem is we have to deliver a level lot to D.R. Horton for them to build their houses on. And so it kind of dictates that. But we could give up some lots next to Riverhill if that would be amenable, or we would look at other options. But this is the best plan that we've been able to come up with.
How would we get an opportunity to get into that kind of discussion?
Sorry, I just want to add with you, Leslie Ocean over D.R. Horton again. I think I heard one of the concerns was two-story houses next to the existing houses in Riverhill. I think we would be willing to restrict the lots that are adjacent to the existing houses to one-story houses.
Okay.
If that would be something that they would like. The buffer has to do with Chuck and the development. I'm just talking about
Right.
specifically the house types.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
And to talk about the buffer, to do a buffer, it gets very challenging to do that and still make it work. Engineering-wise, yes, I can do it. Financial-wise, it makes it more difficult. One of the things we are doing, though, is installing retaining walls, and these are not just concrete walls. They're matrix top wall, so it has a stone veneer, and there will be screening fences along those properties as well.
All right, thank you.
How much do you estimate to be the cost of one of these normal lots? You've given us an estimate of what the houses would cost. What about the lot?
The cost to develop it?
No, the cost of a lot. I'm not gonna buy 6 of them that are adjacent.
The lot price is approximately $45,000, but we make a discount.
For themselves. Excellent, we need to talk.
Commissioners, have any other thoughts or questions?
One last question. Where does the guarantee of the single-family home come in?
That'd be based on the plat. Thank you for asking that. The standards for the different housing types in R2 have different lot standards. So the townhome lots are smaller. The patio home lots would be smaller. The duplex lots are actually required to be larger. So with what they're proposing, would be the single-family size lots with the 45-foot width.
So, okay, with this size, they could only build single-family homes, is that what you're saying?
No, I guess they could build townhome lots or patio homes, but they would have to, through the final plat process, show where those easements would be. Because the townhome allows for 0 build on the sides. The patio homes are 10 foot on one side, 0 on the other, so there's some access easements that would be required. So those would be.
So the plat would not allow it then?
Right.
Sir, we would be willing to stipulate that the plat would be only for single family. We have no intentions of building any others.
About somebody after you.
Well, the plat, once the plat's approved, it's approved. They would have to go through the zoning process change.
But if your plan is to keep it single family, why not just leave it R1? Because that is single family homes. If that's what you're planning on doing, then why change it?
But it has to do mainly with the topography of the property. And on 225 acres, if we build 510 lots, the average lot size is 0.44 acres. So the average lot size is almost a half an acre. This is a cluster style development which is outlined under the R2 guidelines. And it fits the topography of the property best, and it allows for 40% of the property to remain in open space. If we built bigger lots, we wouldn't have the open space.
Okay, folks, let me just say, we can be here all night, and I don't think anybody in this room wants to do that. We've already had the open meeting. We've already had the open meeting. This is for commissioners to ask questions to city staff or to the presenters. Commissioners, do we have any other questions that we'd like to bring up? Concerns? I would just like to say that, we are up here in a pretty tough position. We take every comment that we hear from the audience very seriously. We also take the directive of the comprehensive plan and the issues that face this city very seriously. In point to the affordable housing issues. I heard several comments tonight talking about Kerrville being a retirement community and wanting to maintain that feel, and I like it just as well. We also have teachers and firefighters and nurses that are having to commute from Bernie and San Antonio and other areas, and it's going to be hard for us to retain that workforce if we don't get a handle on this housing. And so, we're, as a zoning commission, we're kind of catching it from both sides. And it is a tough decision, but I do want to, say that when people say that there are other areas in the city that can be built and used for this, that's true, but I would also say that there's not as many as you would think. We also have an opportunity to make a big impact to that housing issue instead of pecking at it in pieces. Every plan, no matter where it's going to be brought to us in the city, will have concerns from citizens, and that we will take those concerns seriously as well. But it's going to be impossible to make everybody happy when we are trying to accomplish this goal of meeting and getting some affordable housing. I guess at this point, do I have a motion to approve or deny the zoning request?
I guess I'd kind of like to just say that I I think either way, this land's gonna be developed, and the decision is whether we go forward with what's been presented to us, which in my mind is a thoughtful, smart use of this land, especially with the challenges of the topography here in Kerrville. I realize that wherever this lands, whoever's next to it is not gonna be happy with it. I will also say that I am one of those medium income families that struggled when I moved here 13 years ago to find a home that didn't need total remodel. I live in a 950 square foot home because I choose to on a very small lot. I don't think that that's substandard. I think that's what suited my needs. Had there been a development of this sort in Kerrville, I would have been all over it. But it wasn't an option then, and it still isn't an option. There were no new homes available to me. There are no new homes currently available in this community to that middle income family. So I think either we move forward with this or we're gonna be seeing it again in a few months as an R1, and there won't be anybody here to talk about it.
I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to approve the plat with the land use change to go with that. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Just clarification.
Yes.
Approve the zoning with the amendment to the future land use plan. Plat's later on the agenda.
What's that? I'm sorry?
You said plat.
Oh.
Oh, the zoning.
Okay.
The zoning. Yeah, the
Right.
plat will come later on the agenda.
Okay, I move to approve the zoning change request with the land use change required to accommodate that.
And I second that.
Quick comment. I would support it, except to be consistent. I think the last meeting in the issue in the summit, I voted against that because I felt it would not maintain neighborhood integrity, and that's also in the 2050 plan. So I'm going to vote against that. But I do support the project.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have a stalemate. We have 3 for and 3 against. Where does that do, Mike?
Gets me out of my seat. It doesn't pass.
Okay.
So, what I would recommend you do is see if there's more conversation you could have to sway one person either way. And sorry, I mean, that's what you really have
You
to
mean
do.
tonight or
I
table to go?
I recommend you do it tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Can we amend the proposal to say that the developer makes every possible effort to review and for barriers, for all of these things that we've spoken to. There must be the opening of the one main highway first before any of the development begins. That no trucks, expanding on the no trucks through the Riverhill Boulevard. And that you make yourself available to all, not only adjacent, but anyone that really has a dog in the fight that lives anywhere on Riverhill Boulevard, not just within the 200-foot area, that they are able to approach and speak specifically for their areas, that you clarify very carefully the single-story lots, single-story structures, certainly adjacent, probably 2 sets down. And then you have this the most dense part is right there up in that, what's roughly the northeast corner, that really is reviewed, carefully. And that, so all of that being said, that I think the amendment, I mean, the proposal would be that, go forward, because again, this R1, R2, it really, the bottom line, you hit the bottom and confirm this if this is correct, that this would, if you leave it as R1, you're going to be able to have 700 lots on this property. Is that correct? You could do that. I mean, not that you would, but that it would be a possibility, or the next guy, or whatever. I think that D.R. Harton is not gonna leave this one laying on the ground. So, again, I don't know, you wanna start again, and I'll try to condense this into an amendment, a part?
Let's just clarify, is that even amendment that could be accepted?
We cannot put conditions on the zoning. If they're willing to talk about amendments to the plat, which would be the legal binding document on the property lines, where those are. But we can't do conditions of the R2 zoning. Does that make sense?
I'm not necessarily trying to condition it as much as I'm trying to create a format that there's a even exchange of the concerns of the neighborhood.
We would certainly be willing to look at all options, again, that would satisfy the concerns of our neighbors. I've already talked to the gentleman behind me, and he said, how much do the lots cost? He'd just buy those that join him. So we would be willing to consider any viable option to address the concerns of the neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. But one thing I do want to point out, that we will have no construction traffic through Riverhill during the construction period. We've already designated that would go through the main entrance, what's the name of the street? Vintage Heights Avenue. So that will be the first thing that is built, and all construction traffic would be required to go through that, all of our contractors.
Would you agree to blocking off, what's? Green Tree?
I wish I could, I can't.
Back up to that. So we can't do it permanently, but we will have it barricaded during construction.
Oh, okay,
Yes,
all
sir.
right, all right. So, where are we, again, Drew, to language this correctly, that it would be, I mean, we can't put conditions, but we can make.
Right. I mean, verbal commitment from the property owner and from the developer with those conditions. I mean, again, it's not tied to the ordinance. It's not part of the formal approval.
What kind of conditions can we put on the preliminary plat? I mean, is that where we want to talk about these kinds of things? Like, for example, like the no two-story homes on the adjacent lots?
Yeah, let's, Counselor, give us any help?
We could develop an agreement.
Well, this segment is the zoning, obviously, and you're looking at this zoning, is it compatible and all that, and I wrote down some of the things the points you wanted. Drew's right, we can't condition the zoning upon, I mean, you just can't do that. We can take care of this, certainly some of the buffering and elimination of the lots through the
Negotiation?
well, I mean, you could do that. I mean, we had a development agreement. We have a development agreement with this entity and or previous entity, and we could go that route. If it, you know, what I guess what I'm saying is, if you really can't get off 3.3 and you can't decide that this R2 by itself isn't appropriate one way or the other, then we'll go with it. Sometimes it's a 3-3 vote, and we get out of here with a 3-3 vote. I'm just telling you, you can't put these conditions upon a zoning decision as part of a motion.
Could the R1, does it all have to be R2? Or could the R1 from Riverhill extend?
Technically R1, right?
Yes.
I'm just thinking as a buffer, I'm trying to think of a buffer to protect Riverhill.
Yes. The zoning boundary could be modified. We would need that in the form of meets and bounds from the applicant.
before it goes to city council. Also point out, if this is approved tonight, it'll go to city council for another public hearing. At that same city council meeting, they're bringing forward the development agreement to either amend or terminate that agreement. Chuck, do you want to speak to that opportunity for?
The property is presently divided into 10-acre plus lots. It's not a platted subdivision, but we entered into a development agreement with the city at the time that we did that and agreed to do a number of things, including install water line, which we've done at a considerable cost. So we would be willing to enter into a new development agreement with certain stipulations that you all would want. We'd be happy to discuss those.
Prior to going to the council.
Yes, sir.
Let me just add this. So your authority, based on the zoning code, with the decision before you, is to approve the zoning as requested, deny, of course, or approve with modifications. And I know, so what I would recommend you do at this point, I'm just trying to think through this so that you all, we don't have to come back to you. I know the applicant doesn't want to do that. The folks who have spoken here are going to have another bite at this in a public hearing before council. If you think you can get off a 3-3 vote, and you think you can approve it with modifications, let's hear those. Let's go through those again.
What about modifications being Phase 1A and Phase 1C being zoned as R1 and the remainder being zoned as R2? Is that an acceptable modification?
That's your recommendation. That's a zoning recommendation. So yes.
Okay. Joe, commissioners,
Is that,
all of that.
does that, can we have the picture of the phases?
Could you get us? There we go.
Those are the, yeah.
So if we were to do Phase 1A and Phase 1C.
The ones that abut
Yeah.
Riverhill.
1A is from the collector here towards Riverhill. 1C is also from the collector towards Riverhill. So that'd be anything on the north side. Remember, this one's rotated. It's on the right side of the screen from this collector.
Does that alleviate any concerns?
That creates a lot of issues. However, as a compromise, what we could do, take some tweaking, but I believe we could do this. The lots that abut existing Riverhill, we'd be okay if that was zoned R1, just those lots that abut Riverhill.
As opposed to the whole thing. That's a little bit of over tweak. Okay.
I would offer an alternative suggestion. As a buffer, we would agree that the plat be approved as submitted, but we would further agree that we would leave all lots that adjoin Riverhill as open space.
Oh. Done and done.
Looking at this plat, I mean, that's a considerable amount of land. You know, of the lots that abut Riverhill, looking at this, there are probably maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are at the minimum size. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are at least 9 lots that may be double that size. So that's a considerable area. Does that get into spot zoning, Drew?
Well, not if they're gonna leave them as open space. They're just
Just open.
dedicating them as open space instead of building on them.
So they are, sorry, I didn't hear the proposals.
They were talking about the lots that abut Riverhill property to be designated as open space.
No, that would not be spot zoning. It would still be part of this zoning request, same boundary. Just an amendment to the plat.
Can you move the cursor so we can make sure we understand exactly what lots that would entail? starting there.
So the lots, any lots abutting this black line, correct? Their property line adjacent to Riverhill.
So that would include Castle Pines.
Right. These abutting Castle Pines, oh, excuse me.
All of those? Woof.
Chuck,
I'm sorry, say it again.
are you suggesting these on Hickory Hills as well?
That's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
I'm
7, 8, 9
gonna jump in here
lots.
for Chuck. We cannot do that. All those lots, no, it won't work like that. I mean, if there's another compromise, we can talk about that.
What
but
about if those change to more like estate lots, bigger lots?
We could look at them as R1, those lots that abut.
That's what you said.
Yes, sir.
Abutting lots would be R1.
Yes.
What would so that would mean they would need to be 5 foot wider?
5 foot wider, right. We take some tweaking, but let me say this. This is gonna domino over to the plat, which we need all of this to go forward. We're gonna have to do if we do that, the R1 zoning, a lot, those lots that abut Riverhill, that's gonna have to also be a condition on the plat that's coming before you. And we asked for that to all be approved with those conditions. It will give us some time to make some adjustments on our plans and plat.
Can we,
So what he's,
to do a plat and come back?
We could
What he's
approve the
saying is
preliminary plat with the
the lots
condition that those
adjacent
need to be
to
R1.
Riverhill behind
and the
Castle
final
Pines,
plat would reflect those.
these lots on the west side of Hickory Hills, and then any of these lots here would all be a minimum of 5,000 square feet. As you can see, some of those cul-de-sac lots already meet that minimum, but these in particular on Hickory Hills are 45 foot wide. Those would go to 50 foot wide.
Okay, commissioners.
I'm sorry, we're changing the game, so I'm having to think on my feet. But I would ask that so R2, the setbacks in the rear and the front are 15. We're not doing that. We're going bigger but smaller than R1. So the setbacks on what we're asking for are 20 foot front and back. Lots would get 5 foot wider. All the other setbacks would be the same, but we would ask to be able to maintain the 20 foot, at least on the front setbacks.
And we've already had the open meeting. So really, we have an option of approving it as is. We tried that. We could approve with the modification that lots adjoining Riverhill property would be zoned R1. Or we could deny altogether. If we approve the zoning, we could address some of these issues in the plat.
Correct.
Would we be able to go so far as to require a buffer zone at that plat approval?
No,
Okay,
because that wouldn't be part of the subdivision regulations.
okay.
So they could offer to amend the plat, but it could not be a requirement because it's not any kind of rule in the subdivision regulation.
Okay,
Because the approval of the plat, from the board perspective and staff recommendation is, does this plat meet policy? Does it meet the subdivision regulations and those rules? Obviously, we'll get into that. There are some conditions, but the plat meets those rules. There is no requirement for a buffer area. If the applicant wanted to offer a buffer, I think we could work through that minor amendment of the plat, but it would have to be an offer, not a requirement. As we mentioned, we talked through some option on that, but I can let them explain that further.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna have to take a break.
Okay, let's take a 10-minute recess real quick. Recess at 7:01.
Do it again.
All right, thank you for your patience. At 7:10, we're gonna reconvene our discussions. We'd like to hear from the developer one other time,
Okay.
or,
Yeah, so really just talking through some of the challenges and wanting to create a plan that works for Riverhill. Chuck's willing to put in a 20-foot buffer between the entire Riverhill boundary line where it abuts his property. So every single lot would be pushed back 20 feet to leave a native green space before the lots begin.
okay.
Where would the
Alright.
fence line be?
Pardon?
Where would the fence line be?
It would be outside of that 20 feet. So the 20 feet would be left native and not be fenced in. If that makes sense. So all of those lots are currently planned at 120-foot depth. So they would change from 45 by 120 to 45 by 100.
So their back fence would be at 100?
Their back fence would be at 100. That would leave 20 feet of buffer.
How far would our back properties be then to their back properties?
20 feet. Okay. 20 feet might be from that wall to this countertop right here.
Would that exclude the loading zone from being used for playground or snowboard? Just be a green space.
Be green space.
It would just be a green space, not developed.
Okay.
Is there any place to relocate those lots?
I don't think that does not work. We're changing it, and so.
Okay.
Yeah, apparently that is not working anymore.
Commissioners, you know, we've had a motion and a second and a vote at a stalemate, which means it would be denied. Is there anybody that would like to make another motion or based on what they've heard that might change things? No? Okay, well then we're at a stalemate and, you know, like I said, this is a tough decision. Everybody, you know, is thinking hard and working hard to try and meet everybody's needs, but in this case, we're at a stalemate, and so the motion will be denied for lack of a majority.
Garrett, if they will agree to the 20-foot buffer zone, I will change my vote.
Is that a yes or a no?
Sorry, can I
Yes.
add something really quick? Okay. Current R1 is 50 by 100. What we are proposing is 45 by 120. So we are decreasing the width by 5 feet, but we're adding 20 feet to the length. The
Depth.
reason why I'm sorry,
The depth.
the depth, sorry, I said width, depth. So we're decreasing width by 5 feet, but adding 20 feet to the depth. So the reason why I suggested that we limit the lots adjacent to Riverhill to single story is because on the deeper lots, we can fit our single story plans. If you reduce the lot width to 100, which is then providing this 20-foot buffer area, I cannot fit our single story plans because the pad length, depth, is not long enough. So then we would have to go to 2-story, which I know that we don't like either. So I can do a 50 by 100 with a 20-foot buffer, but then they have to be double 2-story plans.
Could you do a 50 or 45 by 120-foot lot, but with a 20-foot setback for the fence? It creates the same green space, but allows you to legally have a 120-foot depth of lot, which I think would allow you to construct single-family homes, which keeps the height down.
Single story.
Is there a motion? on
Single
the
story?
floor?
Yeah.
We're having a discussion.
I
Just trying
don't,
to help.
No, I understand.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know that we could make a motion regarding the zoning that establishes a setback as well. I think that is part of the plat review process.
So could that be can that be a condition on the plat, Drew?
It can be.
Because the zoning does
So we could,
dictate setbacks.
we could change the zoning, and then on the plat, when we review the plat, we could put a condition on the preliminary plat for those lots that have a 20-foot setback.
For the green space.
A 20-foot setback
Meaning-
for fences or any other structure.
Right, nothing can go beyond it.
Okay.
Then what is it?
Question. Even though the fence is there, the property owners would still own on the other side of the fence and be
Correct.
able to do whatever they want with it. So
But they can't build on
They
it.
would not be able to build on
it
it or
doesn't,
fence
you
it in.
could put trailers there, and you could put storage, and you can trash it out really easily. It's not just gonna be green space. I'm just devil's advocate here.
The HOA.
The homeowners association, yes. I don't know. 20 feet isn't much. It doesn't.
The other thing, sorry, I'm
Mhm.
gonna keep throwing stuff at you. The other thing, we would be willing to increase the height of the fence.
Okay.
Right now, we do a standard 6-foot tall privacy fence, but we would be, we could increase the height of the fence to provide an additional visual buffer.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. We've had the open meeting already. We're trying to move forward. Honestly, I don't know that 20 feet is going to do much except, create problems with a area that's hard to maintain, too small to really be useful for anything. And you put fences up on both sides of 20 feet, you have kind of a no man's land that collects trash and varmints and stuff. I don't know that 20-foot buffer would really help.
Could we approve the zoning change but not the plat? I know that's not what you're wanting, but I mean, would that give them opportunity to come back with a different design?
I guess we could deny the plat as presented. We could put some conditions on it, yeah.
Based on the plat as proposed, staff recommends approval because it is consistent with the subdivision regulations. So you'd have to have a reason based on the subdivision ordinance that it is
Okay.
not consistent in order to deny it.
How to answer that question?
You're saying it would have to be approved, is what you're.
We could modify it, add more conditions to it, but it would be consistent with the R2 zoning.
What is the property owner and the developer's recourse if the zoning change is denied?
They'd have the option to appeal to city council.
Okay. In what kind of time frame?
Letter request has to be in our office in 10 days.
Okay.
And then that would be scheduled for a later date at council for a public hearing.
Any commissioners want to make another run at a motion?
I don't know that we really resolved anything.
I don't know that we've got anywhere either.
That's where it is.
Yeah, there's no way.
So, yeah, we've had a motion, a second, a vote without a majority, so the request is denied. Moving on to the next agenda item. Item 2B is public hearing and consideration on a conditional use permit.
This is a public hearing, consideration, and action to recommend a resolution to allow a conditional use permit for a used auto sales automobile dealership
on approximately 0.45 acres, part of lots 5 through 8, Block 15, Westland Edition, more commonly known as 404 Junction Highway. With that, I believe the applicant is here, and I'll let her.
All right.
Hi, my name is Debbie Barron, and I'm the owner of One Stop Advertising and Printing, 404 Junction Highway. I lease the property from Mr. Tom Ferris, and I also, part of my lot encompasses a vacant lot that is actually part of it. And I would like to have a conditional use permit to, not a used car lot, but a consignment lot, to allow the citizens of Kerrville to have a place to come park a vehicle that they would be selling themselves. I would have nothing to do with it other than renting space to them on a very temporary basis to park their car to sell it. I think it's a benefit to the people of Kerrville. I don't see it would be any harm. There's not going to be a whole lot of traffic flow. I think, if anything, it would be advantageous to businesses right there because there'd be a lot of people, coming on a monthly basis. So that's what I propose.
All right.
Any questions?
Yeah, I see cars there like in the picture. I mean, those are, I've seen there's been cars for sale there. That is kind of an ongoing thing.
I haven't had it. I've never been able to do that since I've leased. I've leased over 3 years. Because of the zoning, the city took that away, and I've always had just this, that I've leased, I've always had this space that's doing nothing. I'm just trying to,
I think
I'm just trying to put it to some use.
I think prior to you, though, I'm
They
with
have,
you.
yes,
So
they
it's-
have.
People
They
have
have
used
done
it for that.
before. Not while I've had it, but
Not-
prior they have.
Not with permission, but.
Yeah, yeah.
So you would anticipate your traffic be drive-by? In other words,
Sorry?
you're not going to get phone solicited?
No,
Inquiries?
we have nothing to do with it, other than whoever wants to park their car, they come in and sign a contract with us for consignment.
Mhm.
And that's it, it's up to them. They would call the number, whoever's passing by would call them.
Okay.
It's not gonna add to my in and out traffic any, as far
But
as
people
my
might
business.
stop by to look at a car.
They might, but they're gonna be limited to that lot, and we're gonna have signs there that state that.
This requires a public hearing. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing. And then, yes, Drew?
Get my staff report first.
Okay.
Got a little more. Sorry, I just wanted to introduce that. With regards to the Kerrville 2050 plan, this is not a change in zoning, so it is consistent with the Kerrville 2050 plan. As we went through the rewrite of the zoning code, going from those 49 districts down to 17, one of the uses that was called out by the Code Review Committee, and then on to Planning Commission and City Council, were some of the small existing used car dealerships. So they were put in the C2 zoning district, which is this scale of retail and commercial uses, as a conditional use permit, so that the commission and council could look at them on a case-by-case basis. It's kind of a three-pronged test, if you will. Does this use make sense in this location, yes or no? If not, are there conditions that we can apply to it that make sense? And if we still can't get there, then it does not make sense in this location. Again, this portion of Junction Highway is predominantly C2. You can see the Sears dealership across the street is C3. Backs up to R1 and R1A. Parking would be required based on the conditional use permit. So for the dealership, would be one space for every 500 square feet of indoor sales, which they won't have. One space for every 1,000 square feet of outdoor sales. And then the retail or office space for the existing business is required one space for every 300 square feet. So between the two portions of the lot collectively, they'll have to maintain that many open parking spaces to meet these standards. Mr. Lipscomb, as you asked, if someone were to drive by and wanted to stop and look at a vehicle, they would, based on these numbers, there should be ample places to park for customers, both of the print shop and of the, stop traffic to look at those vehicles. We talked about conditions. Some examples of things that the commission can consider would be screening requirements, landscaping, or fencing. Any other conditions you can think of that might help either mitigate a problem or make this a better fit for this location, we could certainly consider those and apply those conditions. And with that, I'll be pleased to answer any questions before or after the public hearing.
Have any questions before I open the public hearing?
Oh, wait.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Fierce, and I've owned this property for about 22 years and 3 months.
Okay, Drew, is this a public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, just, pardon me, just quickly, 7:25, we're gonna open a public hearing. I'm
So
sorry.
for the first 17 years when I owned the building, I was selling used cars out there on consignment basis. Never had an issue with the city, was never contacted by anybody to tell me yay, nay, good, bad, indifferent. And then 3 years ago, two or 3 years ago, Donna Boyer called from the city and said I was not in compliance because I was zoned W10, which is allowed for new car sales, but not used car sales. And there's never been a desire to put a dealership there. I think Drew even stated that wordage was as low as you were willing to state that. It won't go down to consignment level and it won't go down to a single car basis. It just stops at a used car dealership.
The land use table and the list of land uses that were adopted with the new zoning code broke that down into 2 categories, new and used car sales. We do not have a consignment deal or lot as a land use. The most comparable we have would be a used car dealership. Obviously, they wouldn't be going through the state for a dealership license.
Correct.
But the land use is comparable because there are used vehicles parked for sale.
Correct. So in turn, we've been changed from W10 to C2, which doesn't allow new cars, but it does allow used cars to be sold. So we require, if someone's gonna put a car out there, come in, provide proof of insurance, as well as my coverage on the building and the land that covers everybody that would stumble, fall, whatever may happen there. So I'm just here to support Debbie's ability to maximize her potential to lease that lot from me and maximize her return to try to continue to pay rent in such a high visible area. Thank you.
We're still in a open meeting. Is anybody else like to speak? If not, close open meeting at 7:28. Commissioners, have any questions or thoughts?
How are the vehicles gonna be organized on the lot?
Well, usually in the past, we've allowed 6. Usually in the past, we've allowed 6 cars to be parked there with about
10 feet of space behind the telephone pole. So you would, I'm not gonna mess with that. So there's a telephone pole that sets off Junction Highway probably a couple feet, I'm not sure how many feet. And then those cars are parked with the front of them facing Junction Highway. So as you drive by, you see the cars. You can pull in from Florence Street, you can pull in from the front of Junction Highway, you can pull in the side on Lewis Street. And then you can view the cars, and then the information is on the car, on the whatever the person writes down, age, mileage, price, what have you.
The picture, it appears they're pretty close to Junction Highway. I'm assuming they need to be behind the property line, is that the?
Yeah, so
Yeah, those are close. Those are too close. So there's a telephone pole right there. And then there used to be lines that were put in the pavement to show people where to pull to.
Well, since that area on Junction Highway is basically a lake when it rains, all the cars that drive by there splash water up onto the pavement. And so probably twice a year I have to repave areas of that and fix potholes because of the water, which obviously eliminates the lines that were there to set, which I would try to keep up in the future as it gets repaved.
And there would be some barrier between the employee parking cars and the.
The employees would park in front of the building where there's
Okay.
There's, I don't know the square footage of the parking lot, but there's There's so much parking, it's,
Right here.
yeah, all that from side to side, front to front, and then around the back as well.
Is there a maximum of cars that would be out there for sale?
I've always done 5 or 6, 6 was my max in the past.
So the two things that we could look at, or the commission could consider as conditions for the conditional use permit, is a limit on number of vehicles, either striping or parking blocks set off the property line to make sure they're not encroaching in the right of way. Those would be two good examples.
And they can be set back, even further. I mean, the visibility is so great right there that people are gonna see them whether they're close, middle, or back.
What would be a reasonable maximum of cars for you guys?
It's never gonna be a dealership. It's never, that's just not where any of us would go, so. You could fit a lot, but.
I would say probably 10 or 12 maximum.
Would you be willing to put the concrete parking barrier between the cars and the
Yeah, we just
highway?
have to make sure, because there's a thoroughfare through there off of
Sure.
Lewis, so it would just have to be a place where the cars aren't at risk.
I'm more concerned about the cars right on Junction Highway, like if something happened, they rolled out into the intersection. I'm not saying that would happen, but
Yeah, in 17
or
years, it never
somebody,
happened, but anything's possible.
somebody running up on it and running
Anything's
into your
possible.
cars.
I agree, anything's possible. Yeah, but I'd be willing to do,
So I would-
the safest way to do
I would
it.
recommend those parking blocks be a minimum of 2 feet off the property line.
Okay.
It allows for the front of the car to overhang and still not encroach in the property line.
How much room do we have from property line to curb?
I'm not positive.
Okay.
Varies anywhere from 8 to 12 feet on our state highways.
Oh, that might happen.
So Drew, are we suggesting just parking blocks, no striping, or? I guess it could be either one.
It could be either one. I think the parking block would last longer with the water.
So that's probably property line, but it doesn't.
Yeah,
give us
that's
this
your property
way.
line.
So that, I don't know how you would grade that, scale it. 1
Yeah,
inch is 80
we can
feet.
come off and get some dimensions off the backside. He does have a survey, but it does not have a dimension from curb to property line. Telephone poles are a close example. Those should be in the public right of way. Is that 3 or 4 inches, 2 feet?
So right now, like at 513 Junction Highway at Taylor Properties, there's a Corvette that's been there for probably a year.
Mhm.
And I don't think they're zoned for that, but it doesn't matter. And then Ultimate Auto has an El Camino out there that's set up pretty far. I know Sears have had cars in the past that have been up close to Junction Highway, so it's always just kind of been a hodgepodge of where people decide to put it, and there was never any issues. Lamilliards as well are very semi-close to them.
I think the parking block would be a more sustainable demarcation, so the vehicles aren't moving past those lines and encroaching into the right of way.
You guys, you'd be open to that maximum of 12 with parking stops?
Sure. We could even set, 6 up front, 6 up back, and then leave that thoroughfare going through there, so there's never an obstacle.
Any other questions?
Commissioners, do I have a motion?
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit with the condition of a maximum of 12 cars and concrete parking blocks set a minimum of 2 feet off the property line.
Okay.
Do we want to include striping?
I don't think that's
It
necessary.
won't last.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 5-1.
You're at the 6.
Chairman, can you call the vote against, just so it's out for the record?
Oh, for the record, the vote was 5 in favor, 1 against.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next item, item 2C, public hearing and resolution on a signing variance.
Publication, consideration, and action concerning a variance request in accordance with Chapter 92 of the Sign Code of the Code of Ordinances, City of Kerrville, to allow directional signs to exceed 6 square feet for Peterson Regional Medical Center, located at 551 Hill Country Drive. You do have in your packet, I've got a few slides in here of the entire sign package. Peterson Regional Medical Center is looking at an overall sign package. The only 3 signs that do not meet the sign code are these 3 directionals that we'll talk about. Here's the overall sign package site plan showing where all the new signage is going. These 3 in red are the new directionals. And there's a picture of those. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant to explain the bigger picture there.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present this request. My name is Joe Peaser. I'm the Vice President of Operations at Peterson. And before you, we do have a request for a sign variance. As Drew said, we are working on an overall signage refresh for our entire campus. This includes not just exterior signage, but interior signage as well. We moved actually from where we're standing right now back in 2008 to our new campus. And we've added some buildings, moved some services around, and so we want to make it easier for our patients to find where it is that they're going. The signs that you're looking at right now, as you can see, all include basically signage letting people know where our emergency department is. If you've ever had to go to the emergency department, people, they're usually not at their best. They're not feeling well. It's truly an emergency. So whether they're driving themselves or have somebody else driving them, the signage, the 6 square feet, and we did take some pictures. I don't know, perfect. So this is, the first one is, there we go. So on the left side, you can see per ordinance, and so we basically had the sign company that we're working with put together a mock-up sign of what the sign would look like if we complied with the ordinance, and then what the sign would look like based on the signage vendor's recommendation. So you can see on the left, per ordinance, and on the right is as proposed. And so this is if you are heading to the medical center on Wesley Drive, heading towards Hill Country Drive. The second sign is on Hill Country Drive. Again, if you are headed from where our new hospice home care building is on Hill Country Drive towards the hospital, showing you that you need to turn left in order to be able to get into the emergency department. And then the last sign is before, so if you turn from Cully Drive onto Hill Country Drive towards the hospital, this sign would be right just past our hospice home care building again, letting you know where the emergency department is along with the medical professional building.
All right. Okay, thank you.
I'll go through our evaluation criteria since it is considered a variance for the signage. First, the commission must use the following criteria to consider a variance. To this chapter, no variance may be granted unless it makes the following findings. The variance request has been made based on the overall size of the medical center campus and the importance placed on wayfinding for medical services, particularly the emergency medical services. Again, the sign code wasn't developed for these larger campuses, for the medical center, KISD, Shriner. Sign code was really built for the majority, the other 99% of non-residential property. So this is unique. There would be a hardship based on the existing code. That literal enforcement would create that unnecessary smaller sign in a medical emergency situation. And again, on such a large campus. The request is not contrary to the public interest nor a detriment to the public welfare of the surrounding area. And the benefit would be to the public welfare for these wayfinding purposes. Not contrary to the objectives in the Kerrville 2050 plan. This is the minimum request necessary to meet their needs. These proposed signs are actually the same size as their existing wayfinding signs. These 3 are just new signs as the campus has continued to grow. The request is based on the property and the overall scale of the medical center. It is not based on the subdivision of the land. It is not based on any self-imposed circumstances. And it does not make the property any more valuable or profitable.
does not repeal any development regulations, does not constitute a zoning change, and only affects these three specific signs. And the signs would not be allowed at this size, otherwise without the variance. They are not prohibited signs, they're just larger than the code would require. So I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
So they're the same size as the other signs on the campus?
Yeah, let me get back to the map here.
Those are approved under?
Yes, so they kind of look gray on here. The green signs are other wayfinding signs across the campus. Those are existing pretty close to the scale. They are replacing those with a refresh with everything else. Those are grandfathered, so they're allowed to reface those without the variance. Again, these three new, as Mr. Pizor mentioned, are new for some of the changes that they've had over the last few years.
This requires a public hearing at 7:41. Open the public hearing. And seeing nobody approach, we'll close the public hearing at 7:41. Commissioners, any thoughts? And this seems to make sense to me, really.
I move we approve.
I second.
Got a motion to approve and a motion to, and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0. All right. Consideration and action, item 3A on the plat of Vintage Heights. Since that,
This is consideration and action concerning a preliminary plat for the Vintage Heights Subdivision, being a certain tract or parcel comprising of approximately 184.75 acres out of the Nathaniel Hoyt Survey number 147, abstract number 178, and 41.01 acres out of the John A. Southmain Survey number 148, abstract number 288, a total of approximately 225.76 acres, City of Kerrville, Kerr County, generally located east of Medina Highway and south of Riverhill Boulevard. Get back to the right slide. This is the plat for Vintage Heights. This plat is, the staff comments that you have in your backup indicates this original set of criteria is dependent upon the zone change application. Since the zone change did not pass, I'm going to amend these conditions. The current conditions for recommendation of approval are that the existing development agreement shall be modified or terminated by City Council prior to the final plat. Again, this is scheduled for the January 14th, unless there's any modifications given the zoning, to modify that development agreement for those large lots that they had originally proposed. Because that development agreement negated the requirement to plat, we were working with them to either modify or terminate it entirely. So that'll need to happen before the final plat comes before the commission. A waiver from City Council must be approved prior to the final plat for what is currently Raw Circle. It is an overlinked cul-de-sac, and that requires council approval, again, prior to the final plat. I'm going to add a new condition that the preliminary plat shall comply with the zoning district on the property and those zoning lot standards prior to the final plat. So if they want to move forward with this layout and massage it to meet the R1 standards, they have the preliminary plat approved and can move forward with that amendment with staff over the course of their time frame to redesign some of that. Without any major modifications to the plat, they can realign some of those lots to meet those R1 standards and bring that back to staff. And we do a staff administrative approval to make sure they meet these three criteria, and the preliminary plat would be approved. Then they would come back for a final plat in phasing based on their construction and their project. Mr. Wilborn, since I spurred that on you, have any questions?
So, is there any way that this can be approved without the zoning request?
That's what I'm suggesting. The commission has two options. As drafted, this is not consistent with R1. You could deny it. based on that, because it does not comply with the zoning code. Or to allow them to move forward with their project without having to come back on a preliminary plat again. We can add a condition that it must comply with the R1s or with the zoning district. Then they can move forward with the appeal if they choose. If the zoning changes the R2, it complies. If the zoning stays to R1, they can make minor adjustments, keeping the overall layout to meet the R1 standard. But that way, it would not have to come back to the commission for that approval. Either way, it meets the zoning code, and until it meets the zoning code, it is not approved. That clears mud.
And it seems like, you know, with everything we've been through tonight, approving this plat as is without,
Seeing the modification.
without knowing what the modifications are gonna be, I don't know that I'm really comfortable with that.
And so that if we're just looking at modifications to R1, giving your approval is this preliminary layout, they would just be modifying those lot widths
To meet R1.
to meet the 50-foot lot width is really all we're talking about at the plat level. If they came in and redesigned the street system and changed the format and shape, it would come back to the commission anyway. So we're talking very minor changes with that
It'll come back
condition.
anyway, right?
It'll come back and,
Say again?
It'll come back to us anyway.
Yes, the final plat comes back. But with that condition that they must meet the R1 or whatever zoning comes out of their process, it keeps them moving forward without having to come back right now. The final plat still comes back, that's correct.
So if we're looking for some way to protect the edge of Riverhill,
Correct.
and we approved the plat, at final plat, that you guys can come back with some kind of idea on that, and then we would have the option to say yea or nay at that point, is that?
Again,
Does that help? I mean,
the
is that?
final plat is still based on the subdivision ordinance for that yes or no. But they could work with the neighborhood and propose some condition and make, again, minor modifications to the final plat, those final phases, and bring those back and present that they've made X modification under whichever zoning, working with the neighborhood, and here's the final version.
And so let me say, the developer, Chuck Kamick, he did make contact with the HOA. He tried to contact them, it was not given the return call. So the intent was, hey, let's meet with you, get your concerns, hear what your feedback is, and we'll try to do what we can. Unfortunately, we didn't get to have that conversation until this meeting tonight. And so I have tried literally at least a dozen times over the past year to try to make housing work in Kerrville, affordable housing. You know how many of them are under construction?
None.
0. We've got somebody here that can do it. There's no other D.R. Hortons come to the table knocking on Kerrville's door. We're talking about 500 lots. Not only that, but the property that was brought up about Kerrville has developed to 30-something acres. They said on top of that, I went to the meeting, the pre-bid meeting on that, and they said we still need, our projection is 1,800 lots for sale. We got 1,300 units that need for rent. We can't make this happen. We need your help.
Yeah, and I want to support it, and you guys are kind of put on the spot to come up with ideas, and that's what I'm trying to think of a way that you can, come up with a creative idea along the edge of Riverhill that still lets the development work.
My only concern is not getting back into a corner where we're forced to approve something that we weren't expecting. And I guess if we were to approve this plat, zoning doesn't get approved, stays at R1, minor adjustments can get made to meet the R1, but no other discussion would happen after that, except for a final plat review.
That's correct. So they would be, again, remember the plat is ministerial. This meets the code except the lot width. Everything else meets the subdivision ordinance. Actually, all of it meets the subdivision ordinance except it does not meet the R1 lot width minimum. So that being such a minor change, if they don't change the layout and they can make that project work with 50-foot wide lots, and that's what they had brought forward, we'd be looking at the same thing. Because where they do have that entitlement to build this at 50-foot lots, I just don't have that drawing in front of you. But it being such a minor change to that layout, you have that room to make that condition. Again, if they make any drastic street changes or connection changes, staff won't approve that, and that'll have to come back for amending the preliminary back before the commission.
So if they had brought us up this very plat, but in R1 form, then we would have to approve it.
It's true. So given the layout of that first case, you have an option of denying it as presented or applying a condition to make it fit R1 or whatever that future outcome is if it goes to council.
So if we deny it, then they would just come back with R1, we'd have to approve it. Yeah, and that's just extra work and time, yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say, if council approves the zoning, if the developer decides to appeal, then this works. It's in compliance. And if they don't and say, okay, it's R1, then if you approve this, then you're approving an R1, we'd have to make modifications to make it
And we would see
comply
it
with
again on the
R1,
final.
correct? Or else, when we brought it back here, you wouldn't deny. By approving the plat, it's a preliminary plat. It does not create any harm, but it does create significant disadvantages for the planned development that would happen if the developer chooses to go forward with it. So please approve it.
And I understand you guys are in a difficult spot. This, again, as presented, is consistent with the zoning that was denied. But if they brought back two versions, one with 45 and one with 50, one with 50 would be approved. Regardless of the outcome of their zoning, that condition would allow them to make that accommodation without the delay of coming back to the commission. So just to try to keep their process rolling, you have that option.
Well, we have it's really kind of up to council. If council approves it, approves the appeal, say we deny the plat, council approves the appeal, it'll come back to us and we will be forced to approve it anyway.
R1.
As our, or no, as-
R2 if
if
the
the city-
council
Okay.
whatever city council decides.
overturns our.
Right, so if we approve it with the stipulation of R1, what we've done is save a step if council approves it. If we approve it as R1, council denies it, it's kind of dead anyway until they come back to the drawing board. If we approve the plat and council denies the zoning,
They could still move to final with the
So-
revised.
Recommended condition is that it must comply with the zoning.
mm-hmm.
That gives them the leeway to go either way. If council approves it, plat does not change, and you've already approved it. So if they appeal and council approves the R2, the plat doesn't change and you've already approved it. They don't have to come back. If they appeal and council denies the appeal and it remains R1, they still have the ability to adjust the plat to R1 standards without having to come back to the commission. If they don't appeal, stick with the R1 they already have. They can start working on those adjustments right now, get staff an adjusted plat, and we review it to see if it meets R1 standards, and they just keep down the R1 path.
Again, it almost feels like if it's up to council and if they approve, it's inevitable. You know, we can put the R1, I mean, we can put the R2, put the R1, you know, quote, restriction on it.
I think we just make a motion to approve it with the condition it meets the zoning requirement.
Right. And that leaves it
Exactly.
open enough to what zoning's in place when they bring any revision back to us. It gives both options for the outcome if it is appealed.
Okay. We have a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the preliminary plat with the condition that it meets the zoning requirements.
Development agreement. Sorry. Three total conditions recommended.
Okay,
The development agreement shall be amended or terminated.
okay,
A waiver from council shall be approved prior to the final plat for what is now Syrah Circle. It's an overlength cul-de-sac. And that they comply with the current zoning on the property.
We get one more thing in there. I don't know, this is not really a requirement, but maybe the owner said he would be willing to try to do something to mitigate the impact along Riverhill. So if you guys could just look at that, and we can at least get a commitment. Now, we'd see that on the final plat.
It has to do with plating, yes. If it's just fencing, it may not be on the plat. If it's just, if it's setbacks, they could put that on the plat.
But if it's rearranging of lots, then that would be on that.
Right, and that would be on the final plat for sure.
tell me again the waiver from council that's required.
I'm sorry.
No, tell me again the waiver that's required from council.
So city council will have to approve the waiver for the overlength cul-de-sac. I keep saying the street name, I didn't point it out. So from this point here,
Oh, that's in phase 2.
yeah, it's in phase 2. But again, you're approving the whole preliminary plat. So from this intersection to the end of this cul-de-sac, 1,800 feet? Cul-de-sac is limited to 600 feet. Based on the topography, that cul-de-sac runs down the ridge line of that hill. The cul-de-sac itself is up on top of that hill. The slopes are too steep on all sides to really get down to meet any street standard. So they are requesting that oversized length be approved.
And what's the name of that street?
Syrah Circle?
Raw Circle.
Am I saying that right?
Grief. It's a snake.
All right, shall I try this again? I make a motion that we approve the preliminary plat with the condition that it meets the zoning requirements, that the existing development agreement will be modified or terminated by city council, and that they obtain a waiver from city council on the overlength of cul-de-sac on Syrah Circle.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes, I'll second it.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0. All right. And consideration and action on item 3B, regarding a plat at Quail Meadows.
Quail Meadows Subdivision being a certain tract or parcel comprising of 1.23 acres of land out of the Samuel Wallace Survey number 113, abstract 347, City of Kerrville, Kirk County, Texas. Generally located west of Meeker and at the east end of Burleson Boulevard, more commonly known as 306 Meeker Road. Preliminary plat is consistent with the zoning code. However, depending upon the final footprints of the buildings, minimal variances would be required for some of these lots. Let's pause here and kind of go out of order. The existing street Burleson dead ends currently at the property line. And they're building their private drive basically along that dirt road. And you see the plat here. Here's the layout of the lots. You see kind of that S curve following what they're calling Street A for right now, and an intersection with Alley B. Those are all private drives, private access to the property owners. Those are encompassed within the lot, so it's not a separate lot. It's just an easement across each lot as drawn here. And here's the tail end of that as it approaches Meeker Road. So this access easement is 30 feet wide, proposed 20 feet of pavement, consistent with fire code. A standard street minimum right-of-way width would be 50 feet. So at least these 3 lots would not be buildable. Possibly 2 other lots would not be buildable if they went with a full 50-foot wide right-of-way. That's why they looked into the options of a private street and what that would look like with the various codes. Their civil plans show the layout of those footprints. This is buildable area that they're proposing. 4 townhome lots off of that small alley, consistent with the R2 zoning. The remaining lots would be single-family lots. As you can see here, in particular, or would be required based on this footprint, a 5-foot setback requirement or variance from the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Again, depending upon those final footprints, they may be able to massage that some. Some of the other lots may or may not require those same setback variances. And also, this is required a waiver for acceptance of the private street because it is both private and does not meet our street requirements. Be a substandard street. Council is required to approve it as part of the subdivision. The staff recommends approval of this preliminary plat with conditions. A waiver be approved from the city council prior to the approval of the final plat. Setback variances, if necessary, shall be acquired prior to the approval. Fire lane striping and or signage shall be required as per city ordinance to provide adequate fire access. Fire code does not dictate that it be striped. Fire code dictates that they provide adequate fire access. In discussions with the property owner, they agreed that striping would be the simplest way to secure and maintain that fire access. So they agreed to the fire lane striping. Fire flow test is required. If you haven't already done it, I don't remember if you had or not. I thought so. A Knox gate opener will be required on both gates. Since it is gated, the fire department has the equipment to open those gates. Upon final plat, we'll look at the complete addressing table and then just notes to continue their final civil utility design with city engineer and public works for a couple of minor tweaks they need to work on and coordinate the overhead electric with K-Pub. Overhead electric is only allowed in service drives or rear lot easements. K-Pub prefers not to be in the rear yard of anything because then they're dealing with fences to get to their lines. This being a private drive constitutes that service drive. Since it's not a public street, they can do the overhead electric, and they're connecting overhead to overhead on both sides. So it doesn't make sense to go underground just to come right back up along this private drive. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Are the gates automatic gates or?
Yes, they'll be automatic gates, and then the fire department will have their opener and their equipment to open the gates for emergency access.
So essentially, this is similar to an apartment complex drive, except we have individual lots.
More or less. And the only reason we're considering it as a private street and requiring that waiver is it's connecting a public street to a public street, gated for private access, but if the circumstances weren't so dictating that we can't fit a public street, we would just require a public street and wouldn't entertain the private street. But that makes it marginally not developable. You're looking at 2, maybe 3 home lots if you put that whole street in. But yes, it'd be more or less like an apartment complex. Each property, except they'll each own their own. You're doing an HOA?
We are.
Okay, for the street maintenance, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay. Does include a private open space, and they're looking at HOA to maintain that street.
And the housing that's going in there will be what?
Workforce housing. Serious.
That's that.
Townhomes.
No.
Square footage? How much?
The townhomes will be 1,100 square foot, and the single family will be 1,400.
Lot 100 is the green space, is that what it's
Yes.
on?
Yes.
Right there at the intersection.
These say single family at 1,200.
Right, the footprint will be, actually, we're going 2 stories
Okay,
to get to 1,400.
gotcha.
Right.
Okay. All right, commissioners, any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion. We approve the preliminary plat as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0. And adjournment. Any other, well, staff reports. Come on
I'll
now.
keep it quick.
Be zippy.
We do have a couple cases ready to come forward in January, January 2nd. Bring in the new year.
We don't have another meeting in December?
We do not. So
Will
we'll have
not be here January 2nd.
January 2nd, we've got annexation and zoning request and a sign variance. I believe that is it at this time. Deadline's passed, so that should be it, unless we get any plats between now and then, so.
All right, very good. Meeting is adjourned at 8:07.